What happens when the world's most powerful businessman faces the unexpected in a courtroom? What would you do if someone insulted you in front of everyone? Would you fight back, or walk away? The courtroom was filled with the usual buzz of hushed voices and scribbling pens. Lawyers exchanged papers, witnesses quietly prepared their testimonies, and journalists huddled in the back, typing furiously on their laptops. The tension was thick, but nothing could prepare anyone for the moment that was about to unfold. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and 1,000 other ventures, sat in the defendant's chair, his mind racing as he reviewed his case. This was a high-stakes trial. A lawsuit filed by one of his former partners, accusing him of intellectual property theft. If he lost, it would cost billions and tarnish the reputation he'd built from scratch. He had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. The room fell silent as the judge, Judge Clark, took her seat. Judge Clark was known for her sharp tongue and tough demeanor. She had a reputation for being ruthless in her rulings, but also incredibly fair. At least, that's how most people had viewed her, until today. Elon had read about her before, but nothing could have prepared him for her presence in person. She was tall, cold, and her piercing eyes scanned the room with an intensity that seemed to strip away all pretense. "Mr. Musk," Judge Clark began, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I understand you're the CEO of several multi-billion-dollar companies, but you're not above the law." Elon had been in plenty of press conferences, dealing with reporters who tried to take him down with one question after another. But this felt different. The courtroom was quiet, all eyes on him, and it was as if time itself had slowed down. He took a deep breath, maintaining his composure. "I'm here to fight for what's right," he replied, his voice steady. "This lawsuit is a misunderstanding. I've always operated in good faith." The judge raised an eyebrow, almost as if she were questioning his sincerity. "Good faith?" she repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you call it? Stealing ideas and passing them off as your own? Running a company based on lies, deception, and manipulation?" The room gasped. It wasn't the first time someone had accused Musk of unethical business practices, but coming from the judge herself, it was a blow that no one expected. Elon's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. This was personal. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "I've built everything I have with hard work and vision. I didn't steal anything," he said, his voice rising just a little. Judge Clark leaned back in her chair, unfazed. "Is that what you tell yourself? The great Elon Musk? The man who can do no wrong? Please, spare me the self-righteous speech." She smirked as she looked around the room. "This isn't a playground for tech billionaires to manipulate their way to the top. You think you're untouchable, don't you, Mr. Musk?" The room was completely silent now, all attention fixed on Elon. There was a palpable tension in the air, and for the first time in a long while, Elon felt a flicker of doubt. His entire life had been spent proving people wrong, overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But here, in this courtroom, the very person who held his fate in her hands was questioning his integrity, his character, in front of the entire world. Elon's mind raced. His team of lawyers had prepared him for everything, for the accusations, for the evidence, for the hard questions. But they hadn't prepared him for this. The sting of public humiliation, the sense of helplessness in the face of an authority figure who was meant to be impartial, yet seemed to have made up her mind about him long before the trial had even begun. He could feel the eyes of the room on him, waiting for his next move. This wasn't just a battle for his company's survival, it was a battle for his very reputation. The pressure was overwhelming, and for a split second, Elon considered the unthinkable, walking away. But that wasn't who he was. "You have no idea what it takes to get to where I am," Elon shot back, his voice rising. "I've fought against the odds my entire life. You want to talk about manipulation? Look at the way you're handling this case, Judge." Judge Clark's face flushed with a mix of anger and amusement. "How dare you accuse me of manipulation? You come in here with your expensive lawyers and your fancy gadgets, acting like the world owes you something. Well, Mr. Musk, I'm not intimidated by your wealth or your fame. You'll be treated just like anyone else in this courtroom." With that, she slammed her gavel down, signaling the end of the first session. "Court is adjourned until tomorrow." Elon sat there for a moment, his mind spinning. The insult had been so public, so blatant, that he could almost hear the whispers of the media already. Was this going to be the beginning of the end? Or could he turn the tables and show the world who he really was? As he stood to leave, one of his lawyers leaned in and whispered, "We need to be careful. This isn't just about the case anymore. It's about how the public sees you." Elon nodded, but inside, he was already thinking of his next move. He wasn't going to let this go. He'd been knocked down before, but this time would be different. He had a reputation to protect, and he wasn't about to let a judge's insult define him. As Elon walked out of the courtroom, the media swarmed around him, microphones and cameras flashing. The questions were relentless, but he said nothing. He didn't have to. The world was already watching, and the next move would be his. Back in the courtroom, Judge Clark sat alone, staring at the papers in front of her. She wasn't sure if she had just made a huge mistake, but she knew one thing for sure: this case was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, and most likely, even more drama. But one thing was certain: what had started as a simple legal dispute was about to become something much bigger. And for Elon Musk, the fight was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next morning, Elon sat in the back of his car, the soft hum of the electric engine barely audible over the hum of his thoughts. The city outside the window passed in a blur of motion and noise, but inside the car, everything felt still. He couldn't shake the sting of Judge Clark's words from the day before. They had cut deeper than he cared to admit. "Stealing ideas, passing them off as my own." Her voice echoed in his head, mocking him. The great Elon Musk. Was that how the world saw him? Was he truly nothing more than a self-absorbed billionaire, hiding behind his wealth and success? The questions gnawed at him as he ran his fingers through his hair, pushing the disquiet aside. He had faced accusations before, from angry former employees to disgruntled investors. But this felt different. This wasn't just a lawsuit. This was an attack on his character, his integrity, everything he had worked his entire life to build. As his car pulled up to the courthouse once more, Elon took a deep breath. It was time to get back to work. His legal team was already inside, preparing for the next phase of the trial. But before he could enter the building, something caught his eye. A small crowd had gathered outside, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. "Elon, how do you respond to the judge's comments?" one reporter called out. "Elon, are you planning to step down as CEO?" another shouted. "Elon, do you think your reputation will survive this?" The barrage of questions was overwhelming. Elon stepped out of the car, keeping his face neutral. He had always been good at controlling his image, but today, something felt different. His heart pounded as he faced the press, but he quickly regained his composure. "I'm here to focus on the facts," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "This trial is about the truth. I've built everything I have with hard work, and that's not going to change." The reporters continued to shout, but Elon ignored them, walking briskly into the courthouse. The questions followed him, but he had learned to tune out the noise. What mattered now was winning this case, not just for his companies, but for his own sense of self. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Elon's legal team was in full force, meeting with experts and strategizing their next move. His lead attorney, Carla, was already at the front, talking to a group of tech analysts. She looked up as he entered the room. "We're ready for today," she said, her tone confident. "But we need to be prepared for anything." Judge Clark is unpredictable. She's already shown she's willing to play hardball. Elon nodded, taking a seat across from her. I need you to make it clear that I'm not just some arrogant billionaire. I've been in the trenches, I've sacrificed everything for this. Carla's gaze softened slightly. We'll make sure that's clear. But you need to be prepared. Judge Clark's comments yesterday weren't just about the case. She's trying to provoke you. To get you off your game. Elon knew she was right. Judge Clark was playing a psychological game, trying to get under his skin. She knew he had a temper, anyone who had followed his career knew that. But this wasn't the time to let his emotions take over. He needed to stay focused. Let's just get through today, Elon said, trying to push aside the lingering frustration. I'll take care of the rest. As the trial began, the room fell into a tense silence. The air was thick with anticipation. This was no longer just about a lawsuit, it was about a battle of wills. And Elon Musk was not one to back down from a fight. Judge Clark entered the room, her sharp gaze sweeping across the courtroom. She didn't acknowledge Elon directly, but her presence loomed over him like a storm cloud. The tension was palpable. Mr. Musk, you seem to have a lot to prove, she said, almost as if she were taunting him. Let's see if you can actually back up your claims. I'm sure the court will be very interested in hearing what you have to say. Elon stood, his hands clenched at his sides. He had rehearsed his opening statement, but the weight of the judge's words made it harder to focus. But he couldn't afford to let her control the room. He needed to take back the narrative. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to defend the truth, Elon began, his voice steady, but with a hint of passion. This lawsuit is based on lies and misinformation. I didn't steal anyone's ideas. I built Tesla, SpaceX, and everything else from the ground up. Every success, every failure, has been my own doing. And I stand by that. He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. He could feel the eyes of the courtroom on him, waiting for him to slip. But he wasn't going to back down. Judge Clark leaned forward slightly. And what about the accusations of manipulation? The fact that you've been involved in numerous controversies and legal battles over the years? How do you justify that? Elon took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading. The judge had thrown him into a corner, forcing him to confront his past. But he refused to let it define him. I've made mistakes, yes. But every decision I've made was with the intention of moving the world forward. I've taken risks that no one else would take. And sometimes, those risks don't pan out. But that doesn't make me a criminal. The judge's expression remained impassive, but Elon could tell she was trying to dig deeper. She was relentless, determined to break him down. We'll see about that, Judge Clark muttered, her voice low. Let's move on to the evidence. As the trial continued, the tension in the room grew. Elon was under constant pressure, not just from the legal team of his opponent, but from the judge herself. Each question, each accusation, felt like a personal attack. But he didn't waver. He couldn't. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had only intensified. News outlets were now reporting on the emotional tension in the courtroom, speculating on the possible fallout from Judge Clark's remarks. The public had become invested in this trial, and the stakes were higher than ever. Elon knew he had to stay focused. This wasn't just a battle for his company's future. This was a battle for his very identity. And he wasn't about to let it slip away. The morning of the third day in court, Elon's mind was racing. Every part of him was wired for the fight, the endless strategy sessions with his lawyers, the sleepless nights rethinking his arguments, the media buzzing like a swarm of angry bees around his every move. But in the back of his mind, there was an ever-growing suspicion, Judge Clark wasn't just against him. She had a vendetta. And that wasn't something he could afford to ignore. As he walked into the courthouse, he noticed the same media frenzy as before. The cameras, the reporters, the prying eyes that had now latched onto every detail of the trial. It felt suffocating, like being trapped in a room full of mirrors. He couldn't escape the scrutiny. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. The judge's icy stare followed his every movement, and the atmosphere felt electric with anticipation. His legal team sat in their usual spots, whispering quietly to each other. But Elon's thoughts were elsewhere. Yesterday, Carla had mentioned that there were whispers about the judge's possible biases. It was nothing concrete, but the more Elon thought about it, the more it felt like there was something he wasn't being told. As he sat down, the door to the courtroom creaked open, and in walked the prosecution's star witness, Jeremy Simmons. A former top engineer at Tesla, Simmons had worked closely with Elon before leaving under a cloud of controversy. His testimony had the potential to be devastating for Elon's defense, but what troubled him even more was that Simmons wasn't just a disgruntled ex-employee, he had a personal history with Judge Clark. Elon shifted in his seat, eyes narrowing. The whispers Carla had mentioned now seemed more like warnings. Simmons was no stranger to the press. He had made several public appearances in the past, railing against Musk and accusing him of running a toxic workplace. But it wasn't his public persona that concerned Elon, it was the fact that he had once been a key player in the development of Tesla's most secretive projects, the very projects the lawsuit was centered around. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, Judge Clark's voice echoed in the room, snapping Elon out of his thoughts. We'll begin today with the testimony of Mr. Simmons. The prosecution's lawyer stood up, motioning for Simmons to take the witness stand. The room went quiet as Simmons walked to the stand, his expression unreadable. He glanced briefly at Elon, but quickly turned his gaze to Judge Clark. Elon felt a pang of unease. The connection between them was unmistakable. The way Simmons looked at the judge, the subtle nods between them, it wasn't just a professional relationship. There was something personal there. Simmons took the oath, and the questioning began. Mr. Simmons, can you please explain to the court the nature of your work at Tesla? The prosecutor asked, his voice smooth and confident. Simmons cleared his throat. I worked as a lead engineer on several key projects, including the development of the Tesla Model S and some of the early-stage work for SpaceX. I was part of the team that helped design some of the most cutting-edge technologies in electric vehicles. The prosecutor nodded, prompting Simmons to continue. And in your time at Tesla, did you ever witness Mr. Musk's involvement in any actions that you would consider unethical? Simmons paused, seemingly choosing his words carefully. Yes, he said, his voice steady. Elon Musk was involved in decisions that I considered highly questionable. There were times when patents were rushed, or designs were altered without regard for their potential consequences. He was always pushing for faster, more aggressive progress, regardless of the cost. Elon's jaw clenched. It wasn't the first time he had heard accusations like these, but hearing them in such a public forum made the sting even worse. He could feel the eyes of the courtroom on him. The whispers of doubt, the growing narrative that Musk was reckless, a businessman who sacrificed integrity for innovation. Judge Clark seemed to be hanging on Simmons's every word. Her eyes never left him, her face unreadable. Elon could feel the pressure mounting. The prosecutor turned back to Simmons. And do you believe that Mr. Musk used his influence to manipulate or deceive his partners and employees? Simmons hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. There were instances when Elon Musk used his position to force decisions through, even when the team wasn't ready. He pushed for patents to be filed before products were fully tested, and sometimes, the designs were rushed to meet deadlines rather than meeting the standards we had agreed upon. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Elon could feel the heat of the room rise as the implications of Simmons's testimony began to sink in. This wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. This was about turning the narrative against him. But it was the next question that made everything click into place. And would you say that these actions were taken to benefit Mr. Musk personally? Simmons paused, his eyes flickering over to Judge Clark. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth before he replied, I believe that was the case. Elon Musk's actions were always self-serving. Everything he did was to protect his empire. Elon's heart sank. It was a strategic move, this testimony. Simmons was laying the groundwork for the narrative that Musk was not just a bad businessman but a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire, even if it meant crossing ethical lines. And Judge Clark, who had been so closely following Simmons's testimony, had all but sealed that narrative in her mind. The prosecutor turned back to the judge, and Simmons's eyes flickered briefly toward Elon once more. But there was no remorse in his gaze, no empathy for the man sitting across from him. Elon could feel the weight of the words settling in, like a chain wrapping around his chest. This was the moment that would shape everything. If he didn't respond, if he didn't show the world who he really was, it would be over. The courtroom was turning against him, but there was one thing Elon Musk had always known: when the odds were stacked against him, that was when he thrived. He stood up abruptly, causing a ripple of surprise in the room. "Your Honor," Elon said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I request permission to speak directly to the court." Judge Clark looked at him with a raised eyebrow but nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Musk." Elon took a deep breath, locking eyes with the judge. This was his moment. And he would not let it slip away. "I will not sit here and let someone like Mr. Simmons destroy my reputation without defending myself," he began. "Yes, I've made mistakes. I've pushed people to their limits, and I've taken risks. But everything I've ever done was for the greater good. Every innovation, every leap forward, it was never about me. It was about the future. About building something that could change the world." The words hung in the air. Elon's voice was steady, but beneath it, there was something raw, a truth that he hadn't shared with anyone in years. He was fighting not just for his company, but for the very idea of what it represented. And as the courtroom fell silent, Elon knew one thing for sure: this fight was far from over. The days that followed were filled with constant tension. Elon's legal team worked around the clock, dissecting every angle of the case, every accusation, and every potential witness that might be used against him. But no matter how hard they worked, one thing was becoming painfully clear: the public was starting to believe the narrative that was being painted of him. The allegations, especially those from Jeremy Simmons, were slowly gaining traction. But Elon had something the prosecution didn't know, something no one had expected. It was time to play his secret weapon. As the next day in court approached, Elon met with Carla and his most trusted advisors. He wasn't sure how far the narrative could stretch before it broke him. But he knew one thing for sure: if the prosecution was going to accuse him of putting profit over people, he would show them the very opposite. "Jeremy Simmons thinks he has me cornered," Elon said, pacing in the conference room. His mind was racing, as it always did when he had a decision to make. "But there's one thing he doesn't know." Carla raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Elon stopped pacing and turned to face her. "He doesn't know what I've built with Tesla and SpaceX is about more than money. It's about changing the world. We've made mistakes, yes, but I've always stood by the mission. I'm not a man who puts profit above the planet." Carla nodded, sensing the shift in Elon's tone. "So, you're planning to put your focus on the mission instead of defending your actions, right?" Elon's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. I'm going to show them what Tesla really is, not just a company, but an idea. I'll introduce a piece of evidence that proves it." At the center of their strategy was an announcement that had remained a well-kept secret for months. Tesla was on the verge of unveiling a breakthrough technology, one that would not only revolutionize the energy sector but would also demonstrate Elon's true commitment to sustainability and the environment. It wasn't just an electric car. It was a clean energy solution that would challenge the way the world consumed power. "If we can show them this," Elon said, his voice gaining confidence, "we can change the entire narrative. The world doesn't need to hear more about my mistakes. They need to hear about what I'm doing to fix them." Carla smiled. "Let's do it." The next morning in court, Elon arrived early, his nerves more under control than they had been in days. It was time to take control of his own story. The courtroom was as tense as ever, the air thick with anticipation. Jeremy Simmons had finished his testimony, but the damage was already done. The prosecution had painted a portrait of a reckless businessman, willing to bend the rules in order to push his vision forward. Elon was portrayed as a man whose ambitions knew no limits, even if they came at the cost of the people around him. But Elon was ready to fight back. Judge Clark entered the room, and the trial began. She wasted no time in addressing the previous day's events. "Mr. Musk," she said, fixing her sharp eyes on him, "the court has heard a great deal about your involvement in questionable business practices. We've also heard the testimony from your former employee, Mr. Simmons, who has painted a very clear picture of your leadership style. Would you like to respond to these accusations?" Elon stood, his expression calm but intense. The room fell silent as he addressed the judge, his voice steady, yet firm. "I acknowledge that I have made mistakes. We've pushed boundaries, and sometimes that's come at a cost. But I've always been motivated by something bigger than myself." He paused, glancing at the jury. "Let me show you what that is." He motioned for one of his lawyers to step forward. The lawyer wheeled in a large flat-screen TV, and Elon turned to the court with a confident smile. "This is a video that I believe will shed light on what Tesla, and by extension, everything I've built, is truly about." The lights dimmed, and the courtroom watched as the screen flickered to life. The video was a polished presentation, showcasing Tesla's new energy initiative, a system designed to provide affordable, sustainable power to communities worldwide. It showed images of solar panels, electric grids, and power storage units, all working seamlessly to provide clean energy to places that had long been neglected by traditional power infrastructures. The video was compelling, focusing not on the products, but on the impact they would have on the world. People were smiling as they plugged in their devices, their homes lit by the power of the sun. Communities in rural areas, previously without consistent access to energy, were now connected to the world. "This," Elon said as the video ended, "is the future I'm working toward. A future where people don't have to rely on fossil fuels. A future where we can heal the planet while moving forward in ways we never thought possible." For the first time in days, a shift seemed to occur in the courtroom. Even Judge Clark, usually so composed and impartial, seemed to hesitate. There was no immediate reaction, but the room felt different. The prosecution tried to keep their focus on the accusations, but the evidence Elon had just presented was undeniable. "How does this change the accusations of financial misconduct?" the prosecutor asked, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Elon stood his ground. "We're not talking about profits here. We're talking about a larger vision. The world is changing, and Tesla is leading the charge. If I've made mistakes along the way, I take full responsibility. But the mission? The mission remains. I believe in it more now than ever before." The tension in the room was palpable. For the first time, the jury appeared to be listening not just to the accusations, but to the man in front of them. Elon wasn't just defending himself anymore, he was showing them who he really was. And in that moment, it became clear, this trial wasn't just about legal arguments. It was about perception, about how the world would remember him. Judge Clark leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she scanned the room, taking in the reactions of everyone present. It was clear that the battle was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare had begun, Elon felt like he was back in control. The courtroom buzzed with muted conversations as Elon Musk returned to his seat after presenting Tesla's energy initiative. It was a calculated risk, but one that seemed to have paid off. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could see the crack in the prosecution's armor. The skeptical faces in the jury had softened, the press was now caught in a whirlwind of new questions, and the usually stoic Judge Clark seemed a little less certain. But Elon knew the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. His move might have momentarily shifted the narrative, but the battle was far from won. As the morning session came to a close, Elon glanced at Carla, his head heavy with the weight of the war still ahead. "This is just one round," he murmured. "They're going to come at me harder now." Carla nodded, her expression grave. "They won't stop until they have you cornered. But you've given them something to think about. You've shown them a glimpse of the bigger picture. That could be the opening we need." Elon's mind raced with possibilities. The prosecution would have to regroup, reassess their approach. But there was still the looming question: what would they do next? How far would they go to destroy his reputation? That afternoon, the courtroom reconvened. The tension was palpable as the jury filed back in, the media cameras clicking away, trying to capture every detail of what was sure to be a pivotal day. Elon's legal team had asked for a short recess, but now they were back. The game had shifted, and the next move would determine whether Elon would regain his footing completely or lose it all. Judge Clark sat at the bench, her expression as unreadable as ever. "We will continue with the defense," she said, her voice cold and direct. "Mr. Musk, you may call your next witness." Elon's heart rate quickened as his lawyer rose to their feet, ready to introduce his next witness, someone who would change the entire trajectory of the trial. "Your Honor, we call Dr. Olivia Hayes to the stand," the lawyer announced. The name caught Elon off guard. He hadn't expected Dr. Hayes to be introduced so soon. She was the renowned environmental scientist who had collaborated with Tesla on the new energy initiative for years. She was the secret weapon that Elon had been keeping in his back pocket, the one person who could give real weight to his claims. Dr. Hayes walked confidently to the witness stand, her professional demeanor steady as she took the oath. She was an expert in sustainable energy and had worked with some of the most prestigious institutions in the world. Her testimony was critical, and Elon was counting on it to solidify the truth of Tesla's mission. "Dr. Hayes," Elon's lawyer began, "can you tell the court about your professional background and your involvement with Tesla?" She smiled warmly at the jury before answering. "I've been an environmental scientist for over 20 years, specializing in sustainable energy solutions. I was introduced to Tesla a few years ago to consult on their energy projects. Over the years, I've seen firsthand how the company is leading the charge in clean energy innovation. The projects I've worked on with Tesla aren't just about cutting-edge technology. They're about reducing global reliance on fossil fuels and creating a cleaner, more sustainable future for all of us." Her words were delivered with such conviction that the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Even the jury, who had initially been skeptical of Elon's claims, were now leaning in, captivated by her expertise. "And can you speak to the specifics of the technology that Mr. Musk has been pushing for?" the lawyer asked, sensing the opportunity to drive home the point. Dr. Hayes nodded. "Tesla's new energy initiative is revolutionary. It's a technology that will transform how the world generates and stores power. By combining solar energy with advanced battery storage systems, we're creating a grid that's not dependent on traditional energy sources. And the potential impact on communities, especially underserved ones, is nothing short of extraordinary. The system we've developed will provide affordable, renewable energy to places that have never had consistent power." The room was quiet, absorbing her words. This wasn't just about cars anymore. This was about the future of energy, about redefining what was possible. It was exactly the message Elon wanted to send. But he could feel the tension rising again. The prosecution was listening closely, waiting for an opening. Sure enough, after a moment of silence, the prosecutor stood. "Dr. Hayes," the prosecutor began, his voice smooth, "you're an expert in your field, no doubt. But let's address the reality here. Tesla is a company that has, at times, made headlines for its reckless behavior. It's easy to sit here and talk about idealistic projects, but when we look at the numbers, when we look at the lawsuits, we can't ignore the fact that this company has often chosen to prioritize profits over the safety and well-being of its employees." Dr. Hayes didn't flinch. She had anticipated this line of questioning. "Respectfully, sir, that's a mischaracterization of Tesla's priorities," she said, her tone unwavering. "Yes, Tesla has faced challenges. Yes, we've made mistakes. But the fact remains that Tesla has always been focused on the long-term goal, to build a sustainable future. The projects we're discussing today, the technologies we've developed, have the potential to improve millions of lives around the world. I would argue that Tesla's commitment to this mission is exactly what makes it different from other companies. The prosecutor's face tightened, but he pressed on. And you believe, Dr. Hayes, that Mr. Musk's leadership has been solely in the interest of this sustainable future? You don't believe that, at times, personal gain or business interests have taken precedence? Dr. Hayes took a deep breath. I believe in the mission of Tesla because I've seen the results. I've seen what this company has accomplished in the face of adversity. I've seen how it's impacted lives. And I've seen the sacrifices that Mr. Musk has made to ensure that these technologies are developed, even when it meant personal cost. Her words were firm, and her eyes never left the prosecutor as she spoke. The entire room seemed to hang on her every word. There was a brief moment of silence before Judge Clark spoke. Mr. Prosecutor, I believe we've heard enough on this matter. The prosecutor looked frustrated, but he sat down. Elon allowed himself a brief moment of relief. The tide was turning, but only just. There was still so much to prove, and the jury had yet to be fully convinced. But Dr. Hayes had done her job. She had reminded everyone of the vision behind Tesla. And in that moment, Elon realized that this trial wasn't just about defending his company. It was about reminding the world why he had started this journey in the first place. For the first time in a long while, Elon allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. The battle wasn't over yet, but maybe, just maybe, he could see a way to win. The morning of day 5 of the trial dawned cold and overcast. Despite the weight of the legal battle bearing down on him, Elon was determined to remain focused. The courtroom had become his battlefield, and every word, every piece of evidence was another blow in a war he couldn't afford to lose. But with Dr. Olivia Hayes's testimony still lingering in the air, he had an unexpected sense of hope. The prosecution, however, was far from done. They had been quiet during Dr. Hayes's testimony, biding their time for the perfect opportunity to strike back. And today, they were going to use their strongest weapon yet, a former Tesla insider who had worked closely with Elon for years. Elon felt a chill run down his spine as he watched the prosecution's next witness take the stand. It was Kyle Martin, a former engineer at Tesla. Kyle had left the company under controversial circumstances a few years ago, and Elon had hoped he would never have to face him again. But here he was, sitting across from him, staring him down with a look of contempt. The courtroom fell into a hush as Kyle took the oath. His appearance wasn't what Elon had expected. He looked tired, as if the weight of the years since his departure had taken a toll. But there was something else in his eyes, something Elon couldn't quite place. Mr. Martin, the prosecutor began, can you please tell the court about your history with Tesla and your role at the company? Kyle cleared his throat, his voice echoing slightly in the otherwise quiet room. I worked for Tesla for 5 years as a senior engineer. I was involved in many of the company's most ambitious projects, including the development of the Model S and several energy-related initiatives. The prosecutor nodded. And how did you come to leave the company? Kyle hesitated for a moment, his eyes shifting toward Elon. I left due to a series of disagreements with how the company was being managed. I believe my departure was due to ethical concerns regarding Tesla's business practices and the pressure I felt to prioritize profits over the safety of the products we were developing. The room buzzed with murmurs, but Elon remained perfectly still. The prosecutor was finally getting to the heart of the matter, the accusation that Tesla had cut corners for the sake of profitability. Elon could feel the room turning against him, the momentum of the trial shifting once again. Could you elaborate on the ethical concerns you had, Mr. Martin? The prosecutor pressed. Kyle glanced briefly at Elon before continuing. During my time at Tesla, there were several occasions where I raised concerns about the quality and safety of the vehicles we were producing. Some of these concerns were dismissed, and it became clear to me that the company was more focused on speed and meeting deadlines than on ensuring the long-term safety of the products. There was a culture of, get it done no matter the cost. Elon's stomach churned. Hearing Kyle speak these words was like a gut punch. They weren't entirely untrue. Tesla had faced production delays, recalls, and quality control issues in the past. But they had worked tirelessly to address those issues, and Elon knew the company's commitment to improving safety was unwavering. The jury, however, was hanging on every word. Were you ever asked to cut corners or ignore safety concerns? The prosecutor asked, his voice now dripping with accusation. Kyle took a deep breath. Yes. There were moments when I felt the company pushed me and others to meet impossible deadlines, sometimes at the expense of critical safety measures. It was a toxic environment that valued speed over quality. I saw this firsthand in the development of several vehicle components, where safety protocols were either ignored or rushed. The word stung, but Elon forced himself to remain calm. He couldn't let Kyle's testimony spiral out of control. This was what the prosecution wanted, to paint him as a reckless CEO willing to sacrifice safety for profit. Mr. Martin, the prosecutor said, turning to Elon, do you dispute the claims that your leadership created an environment where safety concerns were ignored in favor of profit? Elon stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Kyle's. His voice was steady but sharp. Mr. Martin, I do not dispute that Tesla has had its challenges, but I categorically deny that we've ever prioritized profits over the safety of our products. Yes, we've made mistakes. Yes, there were times when we were forced to move quickly. But the notion that safety was ever compromised for the sake of profit is simply false. Kyle's eyes narrowed. I'm not the only one who feels that way, Mr. Musk. The tension in the room was palpable. Elon could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. The prosecutor had made their move, and now it was up to him to regain control. Mr. Martin, Elon said, his tone deliberate, you were an employee at Tesla. You left on your own accord. But you're not here to speak for the company, are you? You're here to offer your own interpretation of events. Your perspective is one of many, but it's not the whole story. Tesla is a company built on innovation, on challenging the status quo. We've made mistakes, yes, but we've worked relentlessly to fix them. And that is something I stand by. For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Elon's words hung in the air, and the jury seemed to be processing what had just been said. The prosecution's attack had been harsh, but Elon's defense was calculated and firm. It wasn't just about defending his company anymore. It was about standing firm in his beliefs. Judge Clark's voice broke the silence. Mr. Musk, you've made your statement. Mr. Martin, you may continue. But the damage had already been done. While Kyle's testimony had planted seeds of doubt in the jury's minds, Elon had managed to push back, reaffirming Tesla's commitment to safety and innovation. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the day drew to a close, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the tide was beginning to turn. The prosecution had thrown everything they could at him, but they hadn't broken him. The truth, he believed, would eventually win. But as the final gavel came down for the day's session, he knew there was still a long road ahead. And there was no turning back now. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating as day 6 of the trial began. The previous day had left Elon rattled, and it was clear to everyone in the room that Kyle Martin's testimony had struck a nerve. The media had already spun the story, focusing on the claims that Tesla had overlooked safety in pursuit of speed and profit. Elon had expected the attack, but hearing it from someone who had worked so closely with him, someone who had once shared the same mission, had made it personal. As the gavel rang, signaling the start of the day's session, Elon took a deep breath. The day ahead would require more than just facts and figures, it would demand every ounce of his resilience. He had to stay sharp. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. Not now. The prosecution's strategy was clear, they were aiming to create a cloud of doubt, to convince the jury that Elon Musk and Tesla were driven by reckless ambition, with no regard for the safety and well-being of the people who depended on their products. They had built their case around this narrative, and Elon knew that today, they would press even harder to solidify it. Elon's legal team had worked tirelessly to prepare a counterattack. They had lined up their witnesses, they had their evidence, and now it was time for them to show the jury the truth, that Tesla's commitment to safety and sustainability was as strong as ever. But Elon knew that words weren't enough. He needed something more. He needed to remind the jury of the bigger picture. The defense's first witness of the day was a surprise, another Tesla insider, but this one had an entirely different perspective. Dr. Amelia Brooks was a former lead engineer who had worked at Tesla for over a decade, overseeing critical safety projects for both the Model X and Model 3. If anyone could counter Kyle Martin's testimony, it was Dr. Brooks. As Dr. Brooks took the stand, Elon felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't just any engineer, she was one of the core members of the team that had worked tirelessly to ensure that Tesla vehicles were some of the safest on the road. Dr. Brooks, Elon's lawyer began, can you tell the court about your role at Tesla and your experience with the company's safety protocols? Dr. Brooks adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. Her voice was calm and authoritative. I was the lead engineer overseeing the development of safety features for both the Model X and Model 3. My responsibilities included ensuring that each vehicle met and exceeded industry safety standards. I was directly involved in designing and implementing crash safety tests, as well as creating features such as the autopilot system, which has been rigorously tested for both its safety and reliability. The jury leaned in, clearly intrigued. Dr. Brooks was exactly the kind of witness Elon needed, someone who could speak to the integrity of the company's safety measures from first-hand experience. And can you speak to the claims made by Mr. Martin that Tesla pushed engineers to prioritize deadlines over safety? The lawyer asked, pressing her for more details. Dr. Brooks's expression remained unchanged. I'm afraid I strongly disagree with that characterization. Tesla is a company that prioritizes safety, innovation, and the well-being of its customers. There is no truth to the idea that safety was ever compromised for the sake of meeting production deadlines. Every vehicle that rolls off the assembly line goes through a series of rigorous safety tests, and we have never wavered in our commitment to producing the safest cars possible. Elon watched as the jury's faces softened. Dr. Brooks's calm, methodical responses were having the desired effect. But then, as if on cue, the prosecutor stood, ready to launch his counterattack. Dr. Brooks, while I respect your expertise, I must point out that you are still a part of the Tesla ecosystem, the prosecutor began, his voice dripping with insinuation. You have an interest in defending Tesla's reputation, don't you? Dr. Brooks didn't flinch. I have no interest in defending Tesla's reputation beyond the truth. My job was always to ensure safety, and I have nothing to gain by lying or misrepresenting facts. The safety protocols I helped implement were not only effective but also in line with the highest standards in the industry. The prosecutor smirked, sensing an opening. But surely, Dr. Brooks, you must admit that Tesla has faced several significant safety recalls over the years. Doesn't that call into question the efficacy of your safety protocols? Dr. Brooks took a moment to respond, her calmness unwavering. Safety recalls are a standard part of the automotive industry, and Tesla has always acted swiftly to address any issues that arise. In fact, our proactive approach to addressing safety concerns is one of the reasons we are consistently rated among the safest automakers in the world. Our ability to respond quickly and efficiently is part of the reason we have the trust of millions of customers. The prosecution's line of questioning faltered. There was no denying that Tesla had taken swift action in addressing recalls and safety concerns. The argument didn't hold up as well as the prosecutor had hoped. But he wasn't done yet. Dr. Brooks, the prosecutor pressed, you've spoken highly of Tesla's safety record, but I have to ask, why were there so many delays in the rollout of Tesla's autopilot system? If safety was such a priority, why did it take so long to fully implement? Dr. Brooks paused before responding. Autopilot is an extremely complex system. It requires years of development and testing to ensure that it works as safely and reliably as possible. The delays you speak of were necessary to ensure that the system was flawless before being made available to the public. Our primary concern was never speed, but safety. The prosecutor's questions had lost their sting. While they had attempted to cast doubt, Dr. Brooks's testimony had only strengthened Tesla's position. The focus had shifted back to the company's rigorous safety protocols and the lengths they had gone to ensure that their technology was not only cutting-edge but also safe for consumers. Elon felt a sense of relief wash over him as Dr. Brooks concluded her testimony. The jury appeared to be leaning in his favor, and for the first time in several days, Elon allowed himself a brief moment of optimism. This was the turning point, the beginning of his comeback. As the court session adjourned for the day, Elon walked back to his seat, his mind racing. They weren't out of the woods yet, but he knew one thing for sure: the shadow of doubt that had loomed over him was starting to dissipate. The truth was on his side. And he wasn't going down without a fight. The courtroom was quieter than usual on day 7. A heavy sense of anticipation filled the air. After a successful day for the defense, Elon knew the momentum had shifted, but the battle was far from over. The prosecution, though bruised, was far from beaten, and they had yet another devastating piece of evidence they planned to present: a recorded conversation between Elon Musk and a Tesla engineer that, in the wrong light, could easily be twisted into an admission of guilt. The defense had anticipated this moment. They'd spent days preparing for this very possibility, but nothing could fully prepare Elon for the sting of hearing his own voice, recorded in a conversation that could be interpreted as revealing the exact opposite of everything he'd spent the last decade building. The tape would be played for the jury today. Elon sat in his chair, leaning forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the wooden surface of the table. His mind raced. He knew that once the tape played, his fate would be in the hands of the jury. He had no idea how this would unfold, but he was prepared for the worst. The prosecutor's voice broke the silence. "Your Honor, we would like to introduce an exhibit into evidence." He gestured toward the screen, where an audio recording was queued up. "This is a conversation between Mr. Musk and a senior engineer at Tesla, recorded in 2018, in which they discussed the company's decision to push production timelines despite safety concerns. I believe this conversation will shed light on the defendant's true motivations during critical moments in Tesla's history." The defense team braced themselves. Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. He had no memory of this conversation, but he knew that it was about to become a focal point in the trial. The prosecutor hit play, and the courtroom was filled with the sound of voices. "Elon Musk, on tape. Look, we need to meet these deadlines. We can't afford to delay the Model 3 launch any longer. The stock will tank, and we'll lose everything. Engineer, on tape, but the safety tests aren't complete. We haven't finished the crash simulations yet. Elon Musk, on tape. I don't care. We need to move forward. The timeline is non-negotiable. Just get the tests done as fast as you can. We'll deal with any issues as they come." The room fell into a stunned silence. Elon's heart raced. His mind was flooded with questions. Was this what the prosecution had been waiting for? His words could be construed as careless, and if taken out of context, they could paint him as a leader willing to put profits above safety. The prosecutor turned toward the jury, his face victorious. As you can hear from Mr. Musk's own words, he was willing to prioritize production deadlines over safety testing. This is the reality of the culture at Tesla, a culture that, under Mr. Musk's leadership, placed profits over people's lives. Elon's defense attorney immediately objected. "Your Honor, I request a sidebar. This recording has been selectively edited, and its context is being grossly misrepresented." Judge Clark nodded, signaling a brief recess for the lawyers to argue. As the courtroom emptied for the short break, Elon sat frozen in his seat, the implications of what he'd just heard sinking in. He wasn't sure how it had happened, but there it was. The prosecution had played their card, and it was a strong one. Elon's legal team huddled around him, their faces tense. His lead attorney, Claire Holloway, spoke first, her voice low but firm. "Elon, we were expecting this," Claire said. "The conversation was real, but it's been taken out of context. What they've played doesn't show the full picture. We'll need to counter this with the truth." Elon nodded, his mind already turning. "What's the full context?" Claire explained quickly. That conversation was about the Model 3 ramp-up in 2018. Tesla was in a critical position, struggling to meet production goals. The pressure was immense. But you were never suggesting that safety should be overlooked. You were simply telling your team to find ways to accelerate testing to meet the timeline, not to skip tests altogether. Elon's brow furrowed. "So how do we prove that?" "We need to bring in an expert witness, someone who was there at the time. Someone who can testify about the context of that conversation," Claire replied. "We can also introduce evidence that shows how Tesla, despite these pressures, continually met and exceeded safety standards. But we have to act fast." The defense was scrambling now, but Elon trusted his team. They had been in these situations before. Claire had a way of turning even the most disastrous moments into opportunities. The recess ended, and everyone filed back into the courtroom. The judge gave the floor back to the prosecution. "Your Honor, the recording is clear," the prosecutor said. "It demonstrates that Mr. Musk, despite knowing the risks, pushed his engineers to meet deadlines at the expense of safety." Elon's lawyer rose from her seat. "Your Honor, we would like to present the full context of this conversation. We believe it has been taken out of context to misrepresent Mr. Musk's intentions." Judge Clark nodded. "Proceed." Claire immediately called an expert witness to the stand, Dr. Samuel Wright, a renowned automotive engineer and safety expert who had worked with Tesla during the Model 3 production ramp-up. Dr. Wright had first-hand knowledge of the situation and could speak to the pressures Tesla faced at the time. "Dr. Wright," Claire began, "can you explain to the court what the situation was like at Tesla in 2018, particularly in regard to the production of the Model 3? Dr. Wright adjusted his glasses and spoke with the confidence of someone who had been on the front lines. "The situation in 2018 was incredibly challenging. Tesla was under immense pressure to ramp up production to meet demand for the Model 3. There were delays, but the company was working tirelessly to overcome them. Elon Musk was deeply involved in ensuring that every aspect of the production process was moving forward, but at no point did he suggest that safety was being sacrificed. The goal was always to complete safety tests as quickly as possible without cutting corners." Claire turned to the jury, her voice steady. "As you can see, the context of Mr. Musk's words was not one of negligence, but rather a call to action in an extremely high-pressure environment. Tesla worked around the clock to meet production demands, but the company has always maintained its commitment to safety. That conversation, when viewed in context, demonstrates Mr. Musk's commitment to meeting production goals while still ensuring rigorous safety standards." Elon felt a wave of relief wash over him as Dr. Wright's testimony began to shift the tide. The jury was paying attention. They were beginning to see the bigger picture. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as day 8 of the trial began. Elon Musk had weathered the storm of the audio recording, but he knew that the war was far from over. The prosecution had already delivered several damaging blows, and although his defense team had managed to swing the momentum back in his favor, the burden of proof still weighed heavily on his shoulders. The question remained, could they convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that he had acted in good faith? Elon sat with his back straight, trying to keep his composure. His mind wasn't on the words being exchanged in the courtroom at that moment. Instead, he was reflecting on the very foundation of the case, the accusations that Tesla had put profits ahead of safety, that the company's rapid growth had come at the cost of human lives. His legal team had fought valiantly to counter these claims, but Elon knew that it would take more than words to dispel the shadow of doubt that had been cast over him. Today would be pivotal. The prosecution had one final witness to call, and it was clear that they had saved their most damaging testimony for last. Elon's defense team had spent the previous night preparing, but no matter how much preparation they had done, the reality of the situation was stark. The outcome of the trial hinged on what came next. The prosecutor, standing confidently in front of the jury, called his next witness to the stand, a former Tesla executive, Michael Kincaid. Kincaid had left Tesla under contentious circumstances, and his testimony was expected to be nothing short of explosive. Kincaid was tall and had the sharp features of someone who had spent years navigating corporate boardrooms. His reputation had been tainted by his departure from Tesla, but in the eyes of the prosecution, he was the perfect witness, someone who had once been inside the company and could now speak to its darker side. As Kincaid took the stand, Elon's heart skipped a beat. This was the man who had once been privy to Tesla's inner workings, a former executive who knew the company's strategies, the secrets, and the pressures that had shaped its rise. "Mr. Kincaid," the prosecutor began, his voice laced with anticipation, "you worked for Tesla for several years in an executive capacity. Can you describe the culture at Tesla during your time there?" Kincaid leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of someone eager to share a story that could potentially destroy a titan. Tesla's culture was aggressive. The pressure to meet production deadlines was immense, and the focus was always on growth, on numbers. There was a constant drive to push the limits of what was possible, but sometimes at the expense of safety. And that came from the very top, from Elon Musk himself. Elon's stomach churned. Kincaid's words were like a dagger, each one a careful strike aimed at his reputation. He had known this man, had trusted him once, and now, Kincaid was turning against him. The pressure to produce quickly led to some troubling decisions, Kincaid continued, his eyes scanning the jury. There were moments when it was clear that safety wasn't the priority. And it wasn't just about the cars. It was about the people, the employees and the customers who were paying for the products. "I saw firsthand how the obsession with deadlines led to corners being cut. I'm not saying Tesla didn't try to address safety, but there were definitely moments when it was more about the company's image and profits than about the people relying on those cars." The prosecutor seized on Kincaid's words, reinforcing the narrative that Tesla had fostered a toxic environment, one where profits came before people. "Mr. Kincaid, do you believe that Mr. Musk's leadership played a significant role in creating this culture?" Kincaid nodded, his eyes cold. "Absolutely. Elon Musk set the tone. He was always focused on pushing boundaries, and while that's admirable in some ways, it led to decisions that sometimes put safety second." The jury was silent, absorbing Kincaid's testimony. Elon could feel the weight of every word. His mind raced. Kincaid's words weren't completely unfounded, but they were far from the full story. Elon knew that his defense team had to counter this narrative, and quickly. The truth had to come out. As the prosecutor continued his questioning, Elon's thoughts turned inward. He had always known that leadership came with its challenges, and the pressure at Tesla had been like nothing he had ever experienced before. There had been times when the company was on the brink of collapse, times when the decisions he made were based not on simple numbers but on a vision of a future where humanity's reliance on fossil fuels could be reduced. But did that justify some of the mistakes that had been made along the way? Was he truly guilty of putting the company's bottom line above human lives? The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This trial wasn't just about proving his innocence. It was about confronting the very question of his leadership and the cost of his ambitions. Elon's legal team rallied quickly, making their objections and preparing their cross-examination. They knew this would be their most important moment yet. Claire Holloway stood up and walked confidently to the front of the courtroom. "Mr. Kincaid," she began, her voice firm and authoritative, "you've painted a picture of Tesla's culture, but I want to make one thing clear. You left Tesla under your own terms, and your departure wasn't without controversy. You were part of a team that made decisions, and now, years later, you're painting a picture that doesn't reflect the whole truth." Kincaid's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. "You claim that Elon Musk set the tone for this so-called toxic culture, but let's talk about what actually happened during your tenure at Tesla," Claire continued. "Were you not part of the leadership team that approved the safety protocols and production timelines? Were you not aware of the extensive safety measures that were in place for every vehicle that Tesla produced? Kincaid shifted uncomfortably. Of course I was aware. But there were times when safety protocols were rushed. There were moments when it seemed like production was taking priority. Claire pressed forward. And yet, when safety issues arose, as they inevitably do in any large-scale production, did Tesla not act swiftly to resolve them? Were not recalls issued, and were not customers' safety concerns addressed? Kincaid hesitated. Yes, but the issue was the culture. The pressure to meet those deadlines, it created an environment where safety wasn't always the number one priority. Claire turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, what Mr. Kincaid is describing is the culture of any company working in a high-pressure environment, where leaders make difficult decisions to keep the company moving forward. But the truth is this, Tesla has always acted swiftly to correct any safety issues, and they have always prioritized their customers' well-being. The decisions made in those difficult times were based on the best interests of the company and its future, not on profits at the expense of safety. Elon could feel the shift in the room. Kincaid's credibility was beginning to crumble, and the jury was starting to see the cracks in his testimony. This wasn't a man trying to help the truth come to light, this was a disgruntled former employee trying to salvage his own reputation at the expense of Tesla. As Claire finished her cross-examination, Elon felt a spark of hope. The tide was turning again, and this time, it felt like a decisive victory. As the days dragged on, the tension in the courtroom became unbearable. The trial had reached its zenith. With the testimony of Michael Kincaid, the prosecution had made its strongest case yet. But Elon knew that the truth had not been fully told. There was more to this story than just the accusations of negligence and reckless leadership. Elon had spent sleepless nights reviewing documents, sifting through emails, and meeting with his legal team to ensure that everything he'd built would not be lost in the chaos of a courtroom battle. He knew that Tesla's future was at stake, not just his own reputation, but the very vision he had spent decades working to create. What he hadn't realized until now, however, was how deeply personal this trial had become. It wasn't just about proving his innocence in the eyes of the law anymore. It was about proving to the world, and perhaps to himself, that his leadership had been true, that the vision he had fought for, the mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, was worth the sacrifices that had been made. As the trial entered its final stretch, the defense had one final chance to dismantle the prosecution's case. The expert witnesses, the testimony, and the strategy had all been set in motion, but now it was time for Elon Musk to take the stand. Elon's legal team had debated whether or not he should testify. The risks were enormous. The prosecution would tear into him, trying to twist every word, every decision, into something that painted him as a reckless, profit-driven CEO. But Elon had decided, this trial wasn't just about words on paper or the interpretations of a few engineers. It was about the choices he had made as a leader, and he would stand by those choices, no matter the consequences. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Elon rose to take the stand. His face, typically composed, was drawn with the weight of everything that had happened over the past few days. But as he sat down in the witness chair, he felt a quiet resolve. Claire Holloway, his lead attorney, stood to address the court. "Your Honor, we call Mr. Elon Musk to the stand," she announced, her voice steady and calm, but with an underlying tension that matched the moment. The judge nodded, and Elon took his seat. His heart was steady now, his mind sharp as he looked out at the sea of faces, the jury, the prosecution, the media. They were all watching him. Claire began her questioning with precision. "Elon, thank you for being here today," she said, her voice clear. "You've heard the accusations made against you. The prosecution has painted a picture of a leader who put profits above safety, who fostered a culture of negligence at Tesla. What do you have to say about that?" Elon took a deep breath before answering, his voice calm but firm. "I disagree with those claims," he said, looking directly at the jury. "Tesla was always focused on creating the best, most innovative products. We wanted to change the world, not just make money. There were difficult decisions to be made, but at no point did I, or anyone at Tesla, ever compromise safety. We were always committed to our mission of creating a sustainable future. Claire nodded, encouraging him to continue. Can you explain the pressure you were under during the Model 3 ramp-up in 2018? The prosecution has suggested that you were pushing your engineers too hard. Elon's expression hardened slightly as he reflected on those days. We were under immense pressure. The success of Tesla, the entire future of the company, hinged on the success of the Model 3. It was our last chance to prove that we could scale and make electric vehicles available to the masses. But pressure doesn't equal recklessness. I was pushing for results, yes, but safety was never sacrificed. If anything, I pushed harder to ensure the cars were safe, to make sure the cars could withstand the tests they had to undergo. But weren't there moments when production timelines were prioritized over thorough safety checks? Claire asked. Elon shook his head. No, that's not accurate. We wanted to move fast, but moving fast didn't mean cutting corners. I understand how someone might interpret the pressure as prioritizing speed over safety, but that's not the reality. We had safety measures in place, and we constantly adjusted and improved our processes. Claire paused, allowing his words to sink in before moving to the next point. Let's talk about the conversation with the engineer, Michael Kincaid, that the prosecution presented. You were accused of downplaying safety. Can you explain what happened in that conversation? Elon leaned forward slightly, the recollection of the conversation clear in his mind. That conversation was about managing the timelines. The Model 3 was a critical project, and we were facing delays. The conversation was about finding ways to accelerate testing, not skipping it altogether. It was about getting tests done as efficiently as possible without compromising their integrity. That's a very different thing than what the prosecution suggested. Claire nodded again. So, you were not asking your team to compromise safety for speed? Absolutely not, Elon replied. The safety of our cars has always been paramount. Tesla has one of the best safety records in the industry, and that's because we never took shortcuts. Our engineers worked tirelessly to make sure every car we produced was as safe as possible. The prosecutor, who had been sitting quietly up until now, stood and objected. Your Honor, this testimony is irrelevant, he said, his voice sharp. Mr. Musk is merely offering his opinion on events that have already been thoroughly documented by witnesses. Judge Clark raised an eyebrow but allowed the questioning to continue. You've mentioned the safety measures Tesla put in place, Claire said, returning to the matter at hand. Can you tell the court more about those measures? Elon nodded, his tone gaining strength. We have an extensive safety protocol. Every Tesla vehicle goes through rigorous crash testing, battery safety checks, and real-world simulations. In 2018, we even made changes to the Model 3 to improve its crashworthiness after we identified areas where it could be stronger. And, let's not forget, Tesla's vehicles are some of the highest rated in safety tests in the industry. The prosecutor jumped in, attempting to derail the momentum. But that's all after the fact, he argued. The point is, there were moments when these tests were delayed, when safety was compromised to meet production deadlines. Elon didn't flinch. The safety of our cars was never compromised. We made adjustments as quickly as we could to meet the demand without sacrificing quality. We worked with a sense of urgency, but we did not cut corners. The defense attorney's questions continued for another hour, with Elon calmly answering each one. The prosecution had tried to corner him, but he had stood his ground, countering every accusation with clarity and conviction. When the questioning finally ended, Elon leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the jury. He had done what he came here to do, tell the truth, no matter how difficult it had been. The courtroom was now holding its breath, waiting for the final moments of the trial. Elon Musk had faced the most difficult battle of his life, and now, as he left the witness stand, he couldn't help but wonder what the next chapter would bring. Could his testimony have been enough? Would the jury believe his side of the story, or would the pressure of public opinion and the narrative the prosecution had painted carry too much weight? The truth was in the hands of 12 people now. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom had become an arena, where each word, each gesture carried the weight of not only one man's future, but the future of a company that had redefined an entire industry. Elon Musk had delivered his testimony with a resolve that few could match, but now, the final days of the trial were unfolding, and the tension was more intense than ever. The defense had rested their case, and the prosecution had presented its closing arguments. Now, all eyes were on the jury. The next step was inevitable: deliberation. The clock was ticking, and the fate of Tesla, and Elon Musk, was hanging in the balance. It was late in the afternoon, and the courtroom was nearly silent. The buzz of the crowd and the clicks of reporters' cameras had quieted down, replaced by the palpable anxiety that hung in the air. Elon was back in the defendant's chair, but he felt strangely detached from the proceedings. His mind was consumed with thoughts of his family, his work, and the people who had placed their trust in him. What would happen if the jury didn't see things his way? Could his vision for a sustainable future really be jeopardized by the trial? His legal team was huddled in quiet conversation, reviewing the documents one last time. Claire Holloway, his lead attorney, was speaking with one of her associates when she noticed Elon's distant gaze. She approached him quietly, resting her hand on his shoulder. "You did everything you could, Elon," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of concern. "Now it's in their hands. We've done our job." Elon nodded, grateful for her support but still far from reassured. I never thought it would come to this. I've spent my whole life building this company, and now everything feels like it's on the edge of a cliff." Claire gave him a sympathetic smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of the pressure she was feeling herself. "This trial isn't about you, Elon. It's about what Tesla represents. The jury sees that. They know how much you've invested in this vision." Elon turned his eyes toward the jury, who were seated across the room. Each of them was focused, deep in thought. A few were writing notes, others were simply staring ahead. It was impossible to know what was going through their minds, but Elon knew that this trial had struck at the heart of what Tesla stood for, a company driven by innovation, by disruption, and by a mission to change the world. The finality of it all was suffocating. If the jury sided with the prosecution, it wouldn't just be a personal loss for Elon. It would be a blow to the entire electric vehicle industry, to the movement toward sustainable energy, to all of the work that Tesla had accomplished over the years. He couldn't bear the thought of it unraveling because of a misunderstanding or a moment of weakness. Meanwhile, in the jury room, the 12 members sat around the table, their faces grim. The weight of the decision they faced was enormous. "We've heard a lot of testimony," the jury foreman, a middle-aged man named Richard, said as he glanced around the room. "We've seen Elon Musk speak for himself, and we've heard from the prosecution, the experts, and the witnesses. It's clear that this isn't a simple case." "Agreed," another juror, a woman named N, replied. "There's no question that Tesla pushed the limits of technology and that Musk was a driving force behind that. But we have to decide if that means he was negligent or reckless in how he managed the company." Richard nodded, his expression heavy with the responsibility of the task at hand. "The question is, did Musk prioritize profits over people? That's the crux of this trial." The room fell silent as the jury members considered the gravity of the question. To some, Elon Musk was a visionary, someone who had changed the world with electric cars and space exploration. To others, he was a billionaire whose ambition and drive might have led to a culture of neglect in his company. The complexity of the case wasn't lost on them. "We also need to remember," and said quietly, "that the prosecution's evidence wasn't airtight. They have their narrative, but Musk and his defense team have pointed out some serious flaws. There's a lot of gray area here." Richard glanced at the rest of the jury. "We need to be sure. We're not here to decide whether Musk is a genius or a villain. We're here to decide if he violated the law. The conversation turned to specifics, the timeline of production issues, the safety measures at Tesla, the claims about the company's priorities. For every argument the prosecution had made, the defense had an answer. But did it answer enough to overcome the damning narrative that had been presented? Hours passed, and the deliberation seemed to drag on. Elon's fate was slowly being determined in this room. After what felt like an eternity, the jury decided they needed a break. Richard stood and called for a short recess. Back in the courtroom, Elon stood near the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the city. It was surreal, how much had changed in such a short amount of time. A company built on the ideals of progress, innovation, and sustainability was now on the brink of being torn apart. The thought haunted him. Claire approached him again, this time with a different look in her eyes. "Elon," she said softly, "they're still deliberating. But I've been talking to the judge, and there's a chance we could see a verdict today." Elon's heart skipped a beat. The idea of a verdict so soon felt like a punch to the gut. "So it's really coming down to this?" Claire nodded, her expression pained. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is it. The jury will have to decide if your actions as a leader were criminal, or if they were just part of the risk you take when you're trying to change the world." Elon turned away from the window, his face steeled with determination. "I'm not a criminal. I did what I thought was right. But if they don't see that, I guess I'll have to live with it." As the recess ended, the jury returned to their seats. There was a sense of finality in the air now. The moment had arrived. Richard stood and addressed the judge, signaling that they were ready to deliver their verdict. The room went silent. The courtroom was a hushed cathedral of tension as the jury filed back into their seats. Elon Musk stood at the defense table, his hands clenched into fists, his face as composed as he could manage. It had been a long journey, one filled with doubt, drama, and the weight of an uncertain future. Yet, here they were, the moment of truth. Every eye in the room was on the jury as they filed in. The media cameras captured the moment, but it was the faces of the jurors that truly mattered now. Their expressions gave nothing away, their eyes hidden beneath the solemnity of their duty. The judge, Judge Clark, looked at the jury with a respectful nod. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The foreman, Richard, stood slowly, holding the envelope that would seal Elon Musk's fate. His face was a mixture of exhaustion and determination as he walked to the front of the courtroom. He handed the envelope to the judge, who carefully opened it and read the paper inside. "Will the defendant please rise?" Judge Clark said. Elon's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stand tall, his posture rigid, his mind focused. He glanced at his attorneys, then back at the jury. In the silence that followed, time seemed to slow. Every breath felt like an eternity. The judge cleared his throat and looked at Elon. "In the matter of the case of the people versus Elon Musk, we find the defendant." He paused. The weight of the words was suffocating. Elon could hear his own heartbeat in his ears as he waited for the verdict that would either break him or set him free. "Not guilty on all charges." For a moment, the courtroom seemed to freeze. Elon's brain had trouble processing the words. Not guilty felt like a foreign concept. He had been preparing himself for anything, a guilty verdict, a hung jury, anything. But this? The silence that followed was broken by a collective exhale from Elon's legal team. Claire Holloway's face lit up with relief as she turned to Elon and gave him a small, knowing smile. His head swam. He had won. His mind raced through everything that had led to this moment, the late-night strategy sessions, the countless hours spent testifying, the endless conversations about the future of Tesla. And yet, all of it had come down to a handful of words from the jury. The crowd in the courtroom remained still, uncertain about how to react. Then, like a ripple across water, applause began. First from the back, and then it grew louder, swelling through the courtroom. Elon, still processing the flood of emotions rushing through him, glanced at his attorneys, who stood and began to clap in solidarity. The media photographers scrambled, capturing this historic moment. The judge raised a hand to silence the room. "Order in the court," he said. "The jury has rendered their verdict. Mr. Musk, you are free to go." Elon remained rooted to the spot for a few more seconds. His hands were trembling now, despite himself. He had expected relief, but the wave of emotions was almost overwhelming. He had come so close to losing everything. As his legal team began to stand and congratulate him, Elon turned toward the jury. His eyes locked onto Richard, the foreman, who had voted to acquit him. He nodded in appreciation, silently thanking the man who, in many ways, had just saved him. Outside the courtroom, the scene was chaotic. The media had gathered in force, desperate to capture every detail of Elon's release. A throng of reporters swarmed the exit, cameras flashing and microphones being thrust into his face. For a moment, Elon hesitated, unsure of how to handle the onslaught of attention. He'd faced challenges in the past, but this felt different. This was no longer about the trial. This was about the future, his future, Tesla's future, and the movement he had been championing for years. "Mr. Musk, how do you feel?" one reporter shouted, the voice cutting through the frenzy. "What does this verdict mean for Tesla?" Elon took a deep breath, stepping forward into the glare of the cameras. "This verdict is not just about me," he said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "It's about Tesla. It's about the mission that we've been building for years, a mission to change the world and make it more sustainable. This verdict allows us to keep that mission alive, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've accomplished." Another reporter shouted a question. "Do you think the prosecution's case against you was a smear campaign?" Elon paused for a moment, considering his words carefully. "I don't want to point fingers. This trial has been about an interpretation of events. But I stand by the fact that every decision I made at Tesla was made with the intention of moving the company forward and ensuring the safety of our vehicles. Sometimes, in the pursuit of innovation, things don't go as planned. But that doesn't mean we're not trying to do the right thing." As the reporters bombarded him with more questions, Elon's mind began to wander. It wasn't just the relief of the moment that had him overwhelmed. It was the realization that the fight was far from over. Tesla's reputation had been damaged, and public perception would take time to heal. The trial had been an ordeal, but it had also been a wake-up call. It had forced him to confront some difficult truths about his leadership, about the expectations he placed on his team, and about the sacrifices he had demanded. Back at Tesla headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Employees had been anxiously following the trial, and now that Elon had been acquitted, they erupted into applause. Elon walked into the main office, where the team had gathered to watch the verdict. Faces lit up as they saw him enter, and a few employees even started chanting, "Elon! Elon!" The energy in the room was infectious, but beneath it, Elon could sense a deeper undercurrent. The trial had taken its toll on everyone involved, but now they had to regroup and refocus. The mission was still ongoing. He addressed the room, his voice clear and unwavering. "Thank you all for standing by me. But this isn't over," Elon said, his tone serious. "We've just begun. The work we're doing here is important. We have a responsibility to the world, to the future. And we're not going to let anything get in the way of that." The employees nodded, their faces filled with determination. Tesla had been through a storm, but they had come out the other side stronger. As the days passed, the media frenzy surrounding the trial slowly began to die down, but the aftermath of the verdict was still being felt. Elon returned to his usual routine, meeting with his engineers, refining Tesla's vision, and pushing forward with his dreams of making humanity a multiplanetary species. He knew that there would always be challenges ahead, but now, more than ever, he was determined to continue the fight for a better, more sustainable world. And with that, he knew, his story was far from over. The air was thick with uncertainty. The buzz of victory had faded, leaving behind a quiet resolve. The courtroom drama was over, but Elon Musk's battle was far from won. Though he had been acquitted, the wounds left by the trial, both public and personal, were deep. Tesla's reputation, once untouchable, had been tarnished. The media coverage, which had been overwhelmingly negative during the trial, left lingering doubts in the minds of many. Headlines around the world proclaimed the trial's outcome, but the focus was more on the drama of the courtroom than the future of Tesla. Elon knew that the company's image would take time to heal. But time was something he didn't have in abundance. Weeks after the verdict, Elon stood in front of his team at Tesla's headquarters, scanning the faces of the engineers, designers, and leaders who had been with him through it all. They were eager, excited even, but there was something else in the air, a level of tension. The energy of innovation, once the driving force of Tesla, had been replaced by a quiet uncertainty. "We've been through a lot, but we're still here," Elon began, his voice steady yet tinged with the weight of the moment. "The trial is over, and we won, but we can't forget what's at stake here. The world is watching us now, more than ever." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We have to rebuild the trust that was lost. Not just with the public, but with our customers, our investors, and with each other. We need to double down on the work we're doing. It's not just about making great cars or sending rockets to space anymore. It's about showing the world that Tesla is more than a company. It's a movement. A movement for the future." His words were met with a soft murmur of agreement. There was no denying that Elon's personal journey mirrored the company's own. Tesla had become synonymous with risk and reward, innovation and controversy, brilliance and ambition. But now, more than ever, Tesla needed to focus on its roots, the core mission that had driven them from the beginning. "Every innovation, every step forward," Elon continued, "has to be backed by integrity. If we've learned anything from the trial, it's that we can't just rest on our laurels. We have to prove, day in and day out, that what we're building is something worth believing in." The room fell silent as his words resonated with everyone present. For many, this wasn't just about technology or product launches. This was about their place in the world. Tesla had transcended being just a car company. It was a symbol of change, of what the future could look like if humanity chose to push forward, no matter the odds. But for that vision to remain alive, the public had to trust Tesla again. Elon's first step toward rebuilding trust came in the form of a bold move, a new Tesla initiative that would address the very issue that had sparked the trial: transparency. The company would release a comprehensive public report detailing the internal workings, safety standards, and production timelines of its vehicles. It was an act of good faith, a way of showing the world that Tesla wasn't just a company hiding behind a glossy image. They were committed to being open, accountable, and honest. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. At the same time, Elon knew he had to regain the confidence of the investors who had been rattled by the trial. Tesla's stock had taken a hit during the legal proceedings, and some major shareholders were growing restless, questioning the company's leadership. Elon's late-night meetings with his financial team became increasingly urgent. He had to strike a delicate balance, showing investors that Tesla was still a strong, viable company, while also conveying the larger mission of sustainability and innovation that had once propelled them to the top. One particular meeting stood out. Elon was seated in a sterile boardroom, surrounded by a group of Tesla's top investors. Their expressions were a mixture of concern and impatience, their eyes fixed on him as he entered. "We've been through a lot," one of the major investors, Kenneth, began. "But the real question is, what's next? We need a clear direction, Elon. The trial may be behind us, but the market's not going to forget what happened." Elon nodded. He had known this moment would come. "I understand. And you're right. We've got to show the world that Tesla is still committed to its mission, to clean energy, to sustainable transportation, to pushing the boundaries of what's possible. I know the past few months have been difficult. But we're on the verge of something big, and I'm asking for your continued support to get us there." He leaned forward, locking eyes with Kenneth. We're going to unveil new models. We're going to push the boundaries of autonomous driving. And we're going to get better at manufacturing than anyone thought was possible. We're not going to hide from the challenges. We're going to meet them head-on. The investors exchanged glances. There was still doubt in the air, but it was clear that Elon had a way of instilling confidence, even when the odds were stacked against him. "You've got our attention," Kenneth said after a long pause. "Now you just need to prove it." Elon's expression was unwavering. "You'll see the results soon enough." Outside of work, the pressure had begun to wear on Elon. The trial had been a public spectacle, but the aftermath was something entirely different. There were the endless media requests, the need for constant appearances and public statements. And beneath it all, there were moments of doubt. Was he pushing too hard? Was he asking too much of his team? The relentless pursuit of a better future had always been his driving force, but now he was starting to wonder if it was taking a toll on everything he had worked for. One evening, after a long day at Tesla's headquarters, Elon found himself alone in his office, staring out the window at the city lights below. His mind raced with thoughts of the future, of the many battles he still had to fight. He thought of his family, the people who believed in him, and the employees at Tesla who had put their trust in his vision. For a moment, he allowed himself to consider something he had rarely done before, the possibility of failure. Not just in business, but in the larger mission he had set for himself. The mission of transforming humanity's relationship with energy, of making space travel a reality, of leading the charge against climate change. The weight of it all was enough to make anyone pause. But Elon Musk wasn't anyone. He wasn't going to stop now. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the blinds of Elon Musk's office, casting a soft glow over the room. The city of Palo Alto lay beneath him, a sprawling landscape of technology, innovation, and possibility. But despite the beauty of the view, Elon couldn't shake the weight on his shoulders. Tesla was still reeling from the aftermath of the trial. Though the verdict had cleared his name, the damage to the company's image and the public's trust was still evident. The stock market was unpredictable, and the media buzzed with constant scrutiny. Even as Tesla's engineers worked tirelessly to innovate, the shadow of the courtroom was a constant reminder that every decision, every step forward, was now under intense scrutiny. But Elon was no stranger to adversity. He had spent his entire career defying the odds, tackling challenges that others deemed impossible. This time, it would be no different. One of the first major moves Elon made was to launch an aggressive marketing campaign to shift the public narrative. Tesla needed to demonstrate not only that the company was moving forward, but that it was committed to transparency, responsibility, and sustainable innovation. The campaign, dubbed Tesla, Built for the Future, would focus on the positive impact Tesla was making on the world. It would feature testimonials from customers, employees, and industry experts, emphasizing the company's vision for a greener, more sustainable future. It wasn't just about selling cars, it was about selling the future. Elon stood in a Tesla showroom, watching as a team of marketers prepared for the launch. The models gleamed under the studio lights, their sleek designs representing the best of what Tesla had to offer. There was a renewed energy in the air, a sense of purpose that had been absent for far too long. "We're not just selling cars," Elon said to Claire Holloway, who was standing beside him. "We're selling a dream. A better future." Claire nodded. "The message is clear, but we have to be careful. The public's trust is fragile right now. We need to hit the right balance between innovation and humility." Elon's face grew serious. "Trust is earned, Claire. We've got the technology. Now, we need to show the world that we're more than capable of delivering on our promises." Tesla's new campaign launched with a grand event, one that Elon hoped would reinstate confidence in both the company and its mission. It was held at the company's Fremont factory, and for the first time in months, there was a buzz in the air. The event wasn't just a product reveal, it was a statement, a promise that Tesla would continue to lead the way in clean energy and innovation, no matter what. The unveiling of the new Tesla Model Y, a compact SUV designed for the mass market, was the centerpiece of the event. Elon took the stage, his trademark charisma in full display. The crowd, made up of investors, media, and Tesla employees, hung on his every word. "We're here today not just to show you a new car," he began. "We're here to show you that the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create. Tesla isn't just about building cars, it's about changing the world. We're on the precipice of something incredible, and together, we're going to take that leap." The applause that followed was louder than anything he had heard in months. There was a sense of pride in the room, a renewed belief in the company's mission. The media coverage, too, was largely positive, focusing on the boldness of Tesla's vision rather than the trials of the past. For a brief moment, Elon allowed himself to believe that this was the turning point. Back in the Tesla headquarters, the mood had shifted. People were talking again, not just about the products, but about the bigger picture. Engineers were more inspired, designers were pushing the envelope, and the marketing team was brainstorming new ways to reach the public. There was a collective sense that, despite everything, they were on the right path. However, as much as the marketing campaign and the product launches had helped, Elon knew that there was still a long road ahead. Public perception couldn't be turned around overnight. Trust had to be rebuilt, brick by brick. One afternoon, Elon received a call from Sarah Jenkins, the head of Tesla's global communications team. She was sitting in her office in Shanghai, a city that had become central to Tesla's expansion into Asia. "Hey, Elon," Sarah's voice crackled through the line. "I've been getting a lot of feedback from our international teams. People are really excited about the Model Y, especially in China. But there's something we need to talk about." Elon leaned back in his chair, sensing the seriousness in Sarah's tone. "What's going on?" "The trial," Sarah said bluntly. "It's still a topic of conversation in the international media. People are talking about it more than you might think, especially in markets where Tesla's brand is still growing." Elon was quiet for a moment, processing what she was saying. "I thought the campaign would have addressed most of that." "It has," Sarah responded, "but it's not just about the trial. It's about the bigger picture. The perception that Tesla, and you, are constantly under attack. People are beginning to question whether the company can keep up with the pace of innovation you've set. The public is still wary." Elon exhaled slowly. "What do you suggest?" "We need more than just positive PR. We need a stronger message about resilience. About the strength of Tesla's leadership and commitment to our mission. We need a face-to-face connection with the public. Maybe even a series of interviews where you can address the elephant in the room head-on." Elon took a moment before responding. "You're right. It's time to take the conversation beyond the courtroom. Let's go on the offensive. I'll do whatever it takes." In the following weeks, Elon took part in a series of interviews, not just with the mainstream media, but also with influencers, tech experts, and environmental activists. He addressed the trial, but more importantly, he framed it as part of a larger narrative, the challenges of pushing humanity into a new era of sustainable energy. "I've made mistakes, just like anyone," Elon said in one of his interviews. "But at the end of the day, I believe in what we're doing. I believe that Tesla is going to change the world. And I'm not going to let anything stop that." It was a message of conviction, of unwavering determination. The public began to notice a change in Elon's tone. He wasn't just defending his actions, he was doubling down on his vision for the future. The more he spoke about Tesla's role in creating a sustainable future, the more the media began to shift from focusing on his personal drama to focusing on the company's future. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Investors started to regain confidence, and Tesla's stock began to climb once again. The public, too, was starting to forgive the past, focusing instead on the new, exciting innovations Tesla was rolling out. Elon had weathered the storm, but he knew the work wasn't over. The future still held many challenges, and there would be more battles to fight. But with every new success, with every new innovation, Tesla was inching closer to its ultimate goal, not just to survive, but to lead the way toward a better world. The road to recovery was long, but Elon Musk was once again in the driver's seat, and he wasn't about to stop now. The weeks following Tesla's recovery campaign had been a whirlwind. Public opinion was slowly shifting, but not everyone was convinced. Despite Elon Musk's unwavering belief in his vision, the stakes had never been higher. The media was still eager to pounce on any misstep, and some investors were watching closely, their patience hanging by a thread. For Elon, the challenge wasn't just proving that Tesla could thrive in a competitive market, it was about leading with integrity in a time when his every move was under scrutiny. It wasn't enough to simply push boundaries, now, he had to do so without faltering. One morning, as the sun rose over Tesla's sprawling gigafactory in Nevada, Elon was already hard at work in his office. His desk was cluttered with reports, memos, and technical diagrams. His phone buzzed incessantly with emails and messages from investors, engineers, and Tesla's executive team. He had just finalized a new partnership with a major global battery supplier, a move that would ensure Tesla's production was sustainable and scalable as the company geared up for its next big product launch, the Tesla Semi. The Semi was a massive project, but Elon knew that it could be the game-changer Tesla needed to cement its position as a leader in the electric vehicle market. But as always, there was a challenge lurking just beneath the surface. Elon's thoughts drifted to the financial side of things. Tesla had burned through cash rapidly during its growth phase, and while the stock had rebounded, there was still concern about the company's long-term profitability. Even as they were rolling out new products, some questioned if Tesla could truly scale at the pace it had set. As if on cue, Sarah Jenkins, Tesla's head of communications, walked into the office, looking concerned. "Elon, we've got a problem," she said. "I just spoke with our finance team, and they're not happy. Our burn rate is still high, and they're worried about hitting the next milestone without more funding." Elon leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "We're not going to stop the mission for the sake of short-term profits. You know that." Sarah nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I get that, but investors want to see profitability soon. They want to see Tesla get over the hump, and there's a growing sense that we're still a little too far from the finish line." "I've been here before," Elon said, his voice steady. "And every time we've gotten close to running out of money, something always happens. We find a way. We always find a way." It wasn't long before another crisis emerged. This time, it was one of Tesla's competitors, Rivian, announcing a new electric truck that would rival the Tesla Cybertruck. The timing couldn't have been worse. With Tesla still recovering from the courtroom drama and the public still a little wary, Elon knew the company couldn't afford to lose its momentum. The competitive pressure mounted as Rivian's truck gained attention, and the media began to compare the two companies. Rivian's truck was sleek and modern, whereas the Cybertruck was bold and unconventional. The market was torn, some called it a battle of the titans, while others questioned whether Tesla could keep up. Elon sat in a strategy meeting, his brow furrowed as he listened to the discussion. "We need to act fast," said Claire Holloway, Tesla's head of marketing. "The media's attention is on Rivian, and we need to capitalize on the hype surrounding our own products." Elon rubbed his temples, frustration mounting. The problem isn't just about the truck. It's the perception. The public is questioning whether Tesla can keep up with the competition, especially after everything that happened with the trial. We need to remind them that we're not just competing, we're leading. Claire nodded. "So, we need a clear message. We need to communicate that we're not just building cars. We're building the future." The following weeks were filled with late nights, long strategy sessions, and relentless work. Tesla's team was burning the midnight oil, working on marketing campaigns, product launches, and customer outreach programs. Elon's leadership was put to the test in ways it hadn't been before. There was no room for error, every decision he made could tip the scales. Despite the pressure, Elon remained focused. His resolve was stronger than ever, but the weight of the situation began to take its toll on him personally. He found himself working around the clock, sometimes neglecting his own well-being in pursuit of Tesla's success. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Elon was sitting in his office, staring at a blank screen. He had just finished a call with investors, who were pressing him on the need for more clarity about the company's path forward. The pressure was unrelenting. His mind wandered for a moment, and he thought about the early days of Tesla. He remembered when the company was just an idea, when the risks seemed insurmountable, but the vision had been clear. Back then, it was all about pushing humanity forward, about creating something that would change the world. He stood up and walked over to the large window in his office, gazing out at the vast Nevada landscape. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to think about something other than the immediate pressures. Maybe it's time to go back to basics, he muttered to himself. The next day, Elon announced a major shift in Tesla's strategy. During a meeting with the executive team, he unveiled a new approach that would combine short-term profitability with long-term vision. He acknowledged that Tesla had to find a way to sustain itself financially in the short term, but he also stressed the importance of not losing sight of the broader goal, transforming the world's energy infrastructure and leading the charge against climate change. "We can't afford to sacrifice the mission for the bottom line," Elon said. "But we also can't afford to ignore the fact that we need to keep the company running. The key is finding balance, being sustainable financially and mission-driven." Elon's new strategy was a bold one, to push Tesla's product pipeline forward while making operational changes that would improve efficiency and reduce costs. This meant accelerating the development of the Tesla Semi, focusing on the expansion of solar products, and ramping up the production of battery technology. He also initiated new cost-cutting measures that would streamline operations without compromising the company's core values. As the weeks passed, Tesla's momentum began to pick up again. The competitive threat from Rivian was still there, but Elon's leadership had given the team a renewed sense of purpose. Tesla was no longer just reacting to challenges, they were shaping their own future. The Cybertruck was still a wild card in the market, but Elon had faith that Tesla's innovative spirit would carry the day. Elon's personal sacrifices didn't go unnoticed by his team. They saw his commitment, his relentless drive to ensure that Tesla succeeded no matter the cost. But they also began to realize that Elon's leadership wasn't just about the company's future, it was about his own personal evolution. Elon Musk had faced incredible challenges in his career, more than most people would ever dream of. And while the journey was far from over, he had learned one important lesson: leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about adapting, pushing forward even when the odds were stacked against you, and leading with conviction. As he sat in his office, watching the sun set over the horizon, Elon knew that the road ahead would continue to be difficult. There would be more obstacles, more tough decisions, and more moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, leading Tesla through the most critical phase of its journey. And no matter what came next, he was ready. The early hours of the morning were eerily quiet at Tesla's headquarters. In his office, Elon Musk stared at a series of blueprints for the next big project, his mind racing with possibilities. The road to recovery had been difficult, but Tesla was starting to find its rhythm again. He'd made sacrifices, redefined his approach, and steadied the ship. But the next chapter in Tesla's story was waiting to be written, and Elon was determined to make it one worth telling. Tesla's foray into autonomous driving was about to take a bold step forward. The company had already made significant strides with its autopilot system, but the true vision of a fully self-driving vehicle was still on the horizon. Elon knew that achieving full autonomy would be the key to transforming Tesla from a leader in electric vehicles to a pioneer in the next generation of transportation. The decision to push forward with this technology was not without controversy. The media, the public, and regulators had long been skeptical about the safety and feasibility of autonomous cars. But Elon was resolute. He saw the potential for autonomy to not only revolutionize driving but also reduce traffic accidents, enhance mobility for the elderly and disabled, and ultimately help in reducing carbon emissions. As part of Tesla's strategy for the future, Elon decided to launch the Tesla Vision Initiative, a bold new approach to building fully autonomous vehicles, leveraging Tesla's deep learning algorithms and vast real-world data. This initiative would push the boundaries of what was possible and lead the way in transforming how the world thought about transportation. Are we ready to go public with it? Elon asked his team one morning, looking up from the blueprints on the table. He was surrounded by engineers, product managers, and a small group of Tesla's most trusted executives. Everyone in the room knew the weight of the decision. If this initiative failed, it could cripple Tesla's reputation as a leading innovator. "We've made tremendous progress," said Sophie Anderson, Tesla's head of AI development. "Our algorithms are more accurate than ever, and the real-world data we've gathered from Tesla owners gives us a solid foundation. But I have to be honest, there are still risks. Full autonomy isn't something you can rush into. We need more time to perfect the system." Elon's eyes narrowed, his gaze intense. "We've always been about going big. The world doesn't change by playing it safe. Full autonomy is the next step. We have the capability, and we have the data. This is our moment." Sophie hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I agree. But I'd suggest we start with a limited rollout. Maybe launch in select markets first, where we can closely monitor real-world performance and gather more data before expanding nationwide." Elon leaned back in his chair, contemplating the suggestion. "I like that idea. But we'll need to make it clear that this is a breakthrough. A new chapter in Tesla's journey." With a decision made, the Tesla Vision Initiative was officially announced. The campaign was designed to showcase not just the technology behind the autonomous system but also the profound impact it would have on society. Tesla wasn't just building a car, it was building a future where transportation was safer, cleaner, and more accessible. The media was abuzz with excitement and skepticism in equal measure. Critics questioned the safety of autonomous cars, raising concerns about potential accidents and the ethical implications of machine-driven decisions. But Elon stood firm. He addressed the concerns head-on, emphasizing Tesla's commitment to rigorous testing and continual improvements. "We're not just doing this for Tesla," he said during a live-streamed event. "We're doing this for the world. Imagine a future where accidents caused by human error are a thing of the past. Imagine a future where transportation is not only efficient but also environmentally sustainable. This is the future we're building, and we're going to make it a reality." The launch was groundbreaking, and although the criticism was fierce, the excitement was undeniable. The buzz surrounding Tesla's bold vision attracted media attention from all corners of the globe. Investors saw this as a clear sign that Tesla was continuing to push the envelope, and as a result, the company's stock saw a noticeable uptick. But as with any major technological leap, the road ahead was not without its challenges. Regulators in various countries began to weigh in, scrutinizing Tesla's claims and testing protocols. There were whispers of potential delays, lawsuits, and restrictions. The risks were high, but so were the potential rewards. In the months that followed, Tesla's leadership team worked tirelessly to address these challenges. They worked closely with regulators, proving that their system was safe, reliable, and ready for the next stage of development. In the background, Elon continued to push for faster progress, knowing that Tesla couldn't afford to be outpaced by its competitors. The pressure began to mount again. Once more, Tesla found itself under a microscope, with every decision and every development being scrutinized by the public and the media. The next big test would come when Tesla finally deployed its fully autonomous vehicles on public roads for the first time. The day arrived sooner than anyone expected. The first batch of fully autonomous Teslas rolled out in select cities, and the world watched closely. Headlines were filled with both anticipation and anxiety. Would these cars live up to the promises made? Would they truly be able to drive themselves safely? Elon stood in front of a crowd of journalists and Tesla enthusiasts during the unveiling, his trademark enthusiasm back in full force. "Today, we're not just showcasing a product," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "Today, we're showcasing the future of transportation. This is the beginning of something transformative. Tesla vision is not just about driving, it's about creating a safer, smarter, and more sustainable world. As the cars hit the streets, the results were closely monitored. Early feedback was mixed. There were successes, with the cars navigating traffic flawlessly and responding to the road in ways that seemed almost intuitive. But there were also challenges. Some cars struggled in certain weather conditions, and there were occasional hiccups in the system's ability to respond to unexpected obstacles. The scrutiny was intense, but the Tesla team took it in stride, working around the clock to make adjustments. Despite the bumps in the road, the initiative was seen as a resounding success. For the first time, fully autonomous vehicles were driving on public roads without human intervention, and the world couldn't stop talking about it. But as always, Elon's focus wasn't on what had been achieved, it was on what lay ahead. The next phase of the Tesla Vision initiative would involve scaling up the program, expanding to more cities, and refining the system based on real-world performance. Elon had always believed that innovation was a process, not a destination. This was just one step in a much larger journey, and he was determined to lead Tesla to the next frontier of transportation. That evening, after the day's events had settled, Elon stood outside the Tesla headquarters, looking up at the stars. He couldn't help but think back to his earliest dreams of changing the world. It had been a long and difficult road, but every challenge had brought him closer to something greater. Something that would outlast him. Something that would change the course of history. And as the future of Tesla unfolded before him, he knew one thing for sure: the road ahead would be just as unpredictable as the journey he had taken to get here. But if there was one thing that had always driven him, it was the belief that the impossible was simply the next challenge to conquer. Tesla's foray into autonomous driving had captured the world's attention, but Elon Musk knew that the company couldn't rest on its laurels. While the Tesla Vision initiative was a success, it was only a part of the much bigger picture he had always envisioned for Tesla. The company was no longer just about electric cars, it was about creating a sustainable energy future for the entire planet. As Tesla's global presence continued to expand, Elon's attention shifted to the next grand frontier: sustainable energy solutions on a global scale. The mission had always been about more than just cars, it was about making a tangible impact on climate change and ensuring a sustainable future. Now, the stakes were higher than ever. Elon sat in a large conference room in Tesla's headquarters, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the company. There was a palpable sense of anticipation in the room. Tesla had just secured a deal to provide clean energy solutions to a developing country in Africa, where electricity access had been scarce and unreliable. The project was ambitious, but if successful, it could serve as a model for future global expansion. "Elon, if we pull this off, it will change everything," Sarah Jenkins, Tesla's head of communications, said, breaking the silence. "Not just for Tesla, but for the world. Think about it, bringing solar power and energy storage to areas that have never had consistent access to electricity." Elon's gaze remained fixed on the map of the region on the wall, his mind whirring. "It's a big gamble," he replied, tapping a pencil against his desk. "But it's also the kind of risk we need to take. We need to think bigger. Not just for Tesla, but for humanity." Claire Holloway, Tesla's marketing lead, spoke up next. "There's also the PR side of this, Elon. This could help establish Tesla as the global leader in sustainable energy. People aren't just looking at us for cars anymore, they're looking at us for the future of energy. But we'll need to make sure this is executed flawlessly." Elon nodded, deep in thought. The pressure was building again, but this time, the risk felt worth it. Tesla wasn't just changing the automotive industry, they were setting the stage for a revolution in energy itself. The world was ready for a shift, and Tesla was going to be at the forefront of it. As the weeks passed, Tesla's engineers and energy experts worked tirelessly on the project. It involved installing large-scale solar arrays and energy storage systems in remote areas that had previously been dependent on unreliable fossil fuel power grids. The project was not just a technical challenge, it was a logistical one. The regions were often plagued with political instability and infrastructure challenges that made it difficult to even deliver the necessary equipment. But Elon was determined. If they could make this work, it would provide not only sustainable energy but also a model for other developing nations to follow. Solar power could offer these countries a cleaner, more reliable source of electricity, while also reducing their reliance on foreign oil and fossil fuels. At the same time, Tesla's leadership had to navigate the growing tension between traditional energy companies and the renewable energy revolution. Tesla's success was threatening the status quo, and many established energy companies were resistant to change. But that didn't stop Elon. He believed that no matter the resistance, the world had to make the transition to sustainable energy, and Tesla was the one to lead the way. The first phase of the project was ready to launch. It would take several months to fully implement, but the initial installations would be enough to provide electricity to thousands of homes in the region. Elon stood at the podium during the press conference to announce the project's official launch. Journalists and industry leaders from all over the world were gathered, eager to hear what Tesla had in store. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just a step forward for Tesla," Elon began, his voice steady. "This is a step forward for the entire planet. By providing sustainable, renewable energy to those who need it most, we're showing the world that the future of energy is not a distant dream, it's already happening. This is how we change the course of history." There was a wave of applause from the audience. It wasn't just about the technology or the innovation, it was about the vision. Elon had always been a visionary, but now, more than ever, people were starting to see the reality of his dreams. The project was a resounding success. The first solar installations were completed on time, and the community began to see immediate improvements. Electricity became more reliable, and the residents of the area found themselves with access to power they had never had before. It was a moment of triumph for Tesla, but also for the global energy movement. As the project progressed, the positive effects became even clearer. Local businesses were able to operate more efficiently with reliable power, children could study after dark, and healthcare facilities were able to provide better care thanks to reliable electricity. The ripple effect was undeniable, and Tesla's reputation as a global leader in sustainable energy was cemented. But as Tesla expanded into new markets, Elon also faced a new set of challenges. The established energy companies weren't sitting idly by, they were beginning to push back. Lobbying efforts increased, and political pressure mounted as governments felt the heat from entrenched fossil fuel interests. The renewable energy revolution that Elon had set in motion was not going unnoticed. One day, during a high-level meeting at Tesla, Elon's legal team presented an alarming development. "We've received reports that a group of traditional energy companies is pushing for stricter regulations on solar energy. They're trying to slow down our global rollout. They claim that we're operating in ways that could undermine their business model." Elon sat back in his chair, clearly unfazed. "Of course they are. They're terrified. This is bigger than just Tesla, this is a fight for the future of energy. They're afraid of the changes we're making. But we're not backing down." Elon's message was clear: Tesla would continue its mission to transform the global energy landscape. He wasn't just fighting for Tesla's future, he was fighting for a sustainable future for the entire world. As Tesla's reach expanded, the company faced challenges on multiple fronts: regulatory, financial, and political. But Elon Musk had always thrived in the face of adversity. With his unshakable belief in the mission, he was determined to keep pushing forward. Tesla's role in the global energy revolution was only just beginning, and there was no turning back. Elon's determination only grew stronger as he navigated the complex web of industry opposition and political hurdles. He knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that the success of the project was bigger than any one company. It was about creating a better world for future generations, one powered by clean, renewable energy. By the end of the year, Tesla had successfully implemented its solar and energy storage solutions in several more countries. The company was beginning to be recognized as a global leader not just in electric vehicles but in sustainable energy as well. The world was taking notice, and Tesla's momentum was building at an exponential rate. And yet, in the back of his mind, Elon knew that the biggest challenge was still ahead: a world that wasn't quite ready to give up on its dependence on fossil fuels. But with Tesla's innovations and his unrelenting drive, he was confident that the battle for a sustainable future was one they could win. As Tesla's energy initiatives began to take root around the globe, the company found itself at a crucial crossroads. The successes of the solar energy projects in Africa and other developing regions had turned the tide of public opinion in favor of sustainable energy. Elon Musk was no longer just seen as an entrepreneur in the tech and automotive space, he was a driving force in the global transition to renewable energy. But with every triumph came a new set of challenges. As Tesla's influence expanded, so did the resistance. Elon Musk had always been a visionary, but even he couldn't have anticipated how swiftly the world's energy landscape would begin to shift. Tesla had made remarkable progress in sustainable energy, but there was an underlying tension between traditional energy companies and the renewable sector. The fossil fuel industry, though struggling with its public image, was still entrenched in economies across the globe. It wasn't going to give up without a fight. Late one evening, Elon sat alone in his office at Tesla headquarters, reviewing the latest reports. The numbers were impressive. Tesla's solar projects were now providing clean energy to millions of homes worldwide, and energy storage systems were being implemented on a scale previously thought impossible. But as he scanned the news, Elon couldn't help but notice the growing opposition. Fossil fuel lobbyists were pushing for increased regulation of solar energy, claiming that Tesla's solutions were too disruptive to the established energy grid. Elon clenched his jaw, his mind working furiously. The challenge ahead was no longer about proving that electric vehicles or solar power could work, it was about proving that the world was ready for the massive shift toward renewable energy. Tesla had spent years building its foundation, but now the real battle was about to begin. The following day, Tesla's legal and political teams convened to strategize their next move. Elon walked into the room, his demeanor as determined as ever. "We knew this was coming. The oil and gas industries won't go down without a fight. They're going to push every button they can to slow us down, but we can't let them." Sophie Anderson, Tesla's head of public policy, spoke first. "The opposition is growing. We've seen bills introduced in several states that aim to impose new restrictions on solar and wind energy. Some of them are even targeting the subsidies we've received for the installation of solar panels." Elon nodded, his mind focused. "We need to fight this head-on. I don't care if it's a political battle or a public relations war, we need to make it clear that we're not going anywhere. The future of energy isn't something we can compromise on." Claire Holloway, Tesla's marketing lead, added, "We've built a narrative around being the clean energy leaders of the future. We've got to double down on that message. We need the public to understand that this isn't just a business, it's a movement. People want clean energy, and they're going to demand it." The room fell silent for a moment. Elon could feel the weight of the moment. The stakes were higher than ever, but he was used to taking on insurmountable odds. "Then let's make it happen. Let's take this fight to the public. Show them the truth. We're not just about cars, we're about building a sustainable future." With Elon's direction, Tesla launched a global campaign designed to showcase the tangible benefits of renewable energy. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about the future it represented. The campaign featured stories from communities that had been transformed by Tesla's solar installations. It showed how schools, hospitals, and businesses were thriving with clean energy, and how entire nations were beginning to see the environmental and economic advantages of switching to solar power. Tesla also made the case that the fossil fuel industry's days were numbered. As the world's energy needs grew, the reliance on finite resources like oil and coal would only exacerbate climate change and economic instability. Renewable energy, on the other hand, was abundant, sustainable, and increasingly affordable. Elon knew that if Tesla could make this a global movement, they could not only change the way energy was produced and consumed but also shift the balance of power in the global economy. The oil and gas companies were the old guard. Tesla was leading the charge into the future. But the fossil fuel industry wasn't backing down. In response to Tesla's campaign, the the industry launched a series of advertisements portraying renewable energy as unreliable and expensive. They highlighted potential pitfalls of solar power, storms that could damage solar panels, supply chain challenges for batteries, and the high initial costs of installation. The ads were a direct challenge to the work Tesla had done over the past decade. Elon watched these ads with a mix of frustration and resolve. He wasn't surprised. In fact, he had been expecting it. The transition to renewable energy would be resisted by those with entrenched power, but that didn't mean Tesla had to play by their rules. "We need to hit them harder," Elon said to his team. "We need to show the world that their arguments are outdated, and that the future is here." Tesla responded with a counter-campaign that focused on the long-term economic benefits of clean energy. They showcased how businesses that adopted solar power were saving millions on energy costs, how entire communities were benefiting from energy independence, and how the environmental impact of fossil fuels was a ticking time bomb. Elon personally took to social media, calling out the misinformation being spread by the fossil fuel industry. He didn't pull any punches. "The future is renewable, and those who deny it are only holding us back," he tweeted, his words spreading like wildfire. The battle escalated over the next few months. Tesla's campaign gained momentum, and more governments began to take notice. Countries that had once been reluctant to embrace renewable energy were now considering large-scale investments in solar and wind infrastructure. The pressure on the fossil fuel industry was building, but so was the pushback. In some countries, oil and gas lobbyists were convincing lawmakers to delay the implementation of clean energy policies or impose additional regulations on solar and wind farms. At the same time, Tesla was navigating its own internal challenges. As demand for solar panels and energy storage systems increased, the company found itself scrambling to keep up with production. Elon knew that scaling Tesla's energy division would require significant investment and innovation. To meet the demand, Tesla needed to expand its production facilities and build new partnerships with companies that could help meet the growing global demand for renewable energy. In the midst of the turmoil, there was a breakthrough. A coalition of investors, environmental organizations, and tech companies began to rally behind Tesla's vision. They saw the writing on the wall: the energy revolution was inevitable, and Tesla was leading the charge. In an unprecedented move, several major institutional investors pledged to support Tesla's energy initiatives with billions in funding. Elon took the news with a quiet sense of triumph. "This is just the beginning," he said to his team. "The world is starting to realize that the transition to renewable energy is not a choice, it's a necessity." As the year came to a close, the battle lines were drawn. Tesla had taken on the fossil fuel industry head-on, and while the fight was far from over, the company had proven that it was a force to be reckoned with. The future of energy was in flux, and Tesla had positioned itself as the leader of the clean energy revolution. Elon Musk knew that this was a tipping point. The world was waking up to the need for change, and Tesla was right at the forefront of it all. The battle for a sustainable future was just beginning, but one thing was clear: Tesla wasn't just part of the future. Tesla was making the future happen. The year had been a whirlwind of highs and lows for Tesla. The energy revolution was in full swing, but Elon Musk knew that the road ahead would only get more difficult. The fossil fuel industry was fighting back with everything it had, using every legal, political, and public relations tactic to undermine Tesla's progress. Yet, despite the intense pressure, the company's momentum continued to build. Tesla had become the face of the clean energy movement, and with that came both enormous responsibility and significant challenges. The real question now was whether Tesla could maintain its position as the leader in this new era. Elon could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders as he navigated Tesla through this ever-growing storm. His commitment to renewable energy was unwavering, but the battle was taking a toll on him, his team, and the company's resources. It was a bright Wednesday morning when Elon gathered his core leadership team at Tesla's headquarters for an emergency meeting. The news had just come in that a major lawsuit had been filed by a coalition of oil and gas giants, challenging the legality of Tesla's energy storage systems and accusing the company of monopolizing the solar energy market. The lawsuit was a direct attack on Tesla's rapidly growing energy division. "We've been preparing for something like this, but not this fast," Elon said, standing at the front of the conference room. "This lawsuit is going to delay our expansion efforts, and it might even scare off some investors. We need to respond to this quickly, and we need to do it in a way that shows we're not backing down." Sophie Anderson, Tesla's head of public policy, spoke first. "We anticipated legal challenges from the traditional energy companies, but this is more aggressive than we expected. If we don't take swift action, it could tarnish our public image and set a dangerous precedent for future challenges." Elon's gaze remained steady as he processed the information. "We can't let them scare us. We need to fight this in the courts, in the media, and in the court of public opinion. But we need to do it strategically. The last thing we need is a prolonged legal battle that drains our resources and distracts from our mission." Claire Holloway, Tesla's marketing lead, piped up. "We need to go on the offensive. We can't just sit back and respond, we need to show the world what they're trying to stop. This lawsuit is about more than just Tesla, it's about the future of energy. We need to turn this into a rallying cry for the entire renewable energy movement." Elon nodded. "Exactly. This isn't just about us. It's about the future of clean energy for the planet. Let's make sure the world knows what's at stake." The next few weeks were filled with tense strategy sessions, media campaigns, and legal filings. Tesla's legal team worked around the clock, preparing a defense that would not only protect the company's interests but also frame the lawsuit as an attack on the entire renewable energy movement. Meanwhile, Elon and his marketing team worked tirelessly to craft a message that would resonate with the public. Elon decided to take the fight to the people directly. He scheduled a series of high-profile public appearances and media interviews to speak about the lawsuit, emphasizing the importance of renewable energy in combating climate change. He made it clear that Tesla would not be intimidated by the powerful interests that were trying to stop them. On one occasion, during a live television interview, Elon was asked about the lawsuit and how it might impact Tesla's future. He leaned forward in his chair, his tone serious but resolute. "They're trying to slow us down because they know what's coming. The fossil fuel industry has had its run, but the future of energy is renewable. And we're going to make that future happen, no matter how hard they fight us." As Tesla's media campaign gained traction, the pressure from the fossil fuel industry only intensified. The lawsuit was one battle, but the industry wasn't stopping there. They launched a series of negative advertisements that painted Tesla as a corporate giant that was more concerned with profits than the public good. The ads featured testimonials from disgruntled former employees, angry customers, and even a few politicians who had been swayed by the lobbying efforts of the fossil fuel companies. At the same time, Elon's personal life began to make headlines. The stresses of running Tesla, combined with the relentless media attention, began to take their toll on his family life. His divorce from Tallulah Riley had been difficult enough, but now the media was buzzing with rumors about his relationship with Grimes, his growing family, and his already demanding schedule. It seemed that no matter how hard he worked, there was always something else on the horizon to distract from Tesla's mission. In the midst of this chaos, Elon made a bold decision. He invited a group of journalists and thought leaders to a live demonstration of Tesla's energy storage systems and solar power capabilities. The goal was to show the world, up close, how Tesla's technology was transforming communities. The event took place in a remote village in Africa, one of the first places to benefit from Tesla's solar power systems. The village had once struggled with unreliable electricity and frequent power outages, but now, thanks to Tesla's technology, it was thriving. Businesses were open longer hours, schools were lit after dark, and healthcare facilities had reliable power to operate medical equipment. Elon stood on a stage, with the villagers gathered around, their faces illuminated by the glow of solar-powered lights. "This is what we're fighting for," he said, looking out at the crowd. "This isn't about profits, it's about changing the world. This is the future of energy." The crowd erupted into applause, and as the cameras rolled, the message was clear: Tesla wasn't just a company, it was a movement. And it wasn't going to stop, no matter the obstacles. Back at Tesla's headquarters, the battle was reaching a tipping point. The lawsuit was dragging on, and the financial pressures were mounting. Tesla had already taken on significant debt to fund its energy projects, and with the legal battle threatening to disrupt its operations, the company was at risk of losing critical momentum. Elon was becoming more reflective. The world was watching, and the consequences of failure had never been so high. Yet, in the midst of the turmoil, he found a new sense of clarity. The world was changing, and Tesla was at the center of that change. No matter the outcome of the lawsuit or the media war, Tesla's vision for the future of energy was bigger than any individual or corporation. It was a movement, and movements were unstoppable. He turned to his leadership team one last time. We're going to win this. Not just because we're right, but because the world is ready for change. This lawsuit is just a hurdle. It's the future that matters, and we're going to build it. The courtroom was packed to the brim, the tension palpable. It had been months since the lawsuit was first filed, and the day of reckoning had arrived. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about one legal case, it was about the future of the renewable energy revolution and the world's shift away from fossil fuels. Elon Musk stood at the front of the room, his usual confident demeanor replaced with an intense focus. His team of legal experts, public relations advisors, and energy specialists were with him, ready for what could be the defining moment of Tesla's journey. The fossil fuel industry had thrown everything at Tesla. Lawyers, lobbyists, and billions of dollars were all focused on one objective: to cripple the clean energy movement and protect their entrenched interests. They had tried to intimidate Elon at every turn, spreading misinformation, launching negative ad campaigns, and using political influence to put the brakes on renewable energy. But none of it had worked. Tesla was still standing, stronger than ever. Elon glanced over at his legal team, his expression grim. "We've fought long and hard to get here," he said softly. "We can't let them win today. Not now." The judge walked in, and the room fell silent. The proceedings began. The plaintiff's lawyer stood up first, presenting their case with a sense of urgency. Tesla is monopolizing the energy market. They're using their influence and technology to destroy competition. This lawsuit is about protecting the interests of thousands of companies and workers in the traditional energy sector. If we allow Tesla to continue unchecked, we risk destabilizing the entire energy grid and leaving millions of people without reliable energy. Elon watched carefully as the arguments unfolded. He had heard it all before. The fossil fuel industry was using the same tired arguments to try and stifle progress. They claimed that Tesla's solutions were unreliable, too expensive, and unsustainable. They painted Tesla as a corporate giant looking to crush smaller players, rather than a force for positive change. When it was Tesla's turn to present, Elon stood up. The courtroom was quiet as his voice filled the space. "The real issue here isn't about competition," he began, looking directly at the judge and the jury. "It's about the future. The world is facing a climate crisis. The traditional energy companies have had decades to change, but they didn't. They had their chance, and they've failed. Now, it's time for a new way forward." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. "At Tesla, we're not interested in domination. We're interested in solving the world's most pressing problems: climate change, energy poverty, and environmental degradation. We are leading the way toward a future where energy is sustainable, accessible, and affordable for everyone." He went on to explain Tesla's impact on communities around the world. From Africa, where the company's solar technology had brought power to off-grid areas, to California, where Tesla's energy storage systems had saved lives during wildfire-induced blackouts. He spoke of the thousands of jobs created, the investments in clean energy infrastructure, and the undeniable fact that renewable energy was no longer a far-off dream, it was a reality. "There's no turning back now," Elon concluded. "We've set a course for the future. And no lawsuit, no lobbyist, no campaign of misinformation can change that." The courtroom was silent for a moment. It was clear that Elon's words had struck a chord, but would it be enough? The judge took a deep breath and glanced over the case files. Then, the unthinkable happened. The judge looked up and spoke in a calm, measured tone. I have reviewed the evidence thoroughly, and I find the arguments presented by Tesla to be compelling. The renewable energy sector, led by Tesla, is not only necessary, it is the future. The lawsuit brought forth by the fossil fuel companies is based on outdated assumptions about energy and competition. Elon's heart raced as the judge continued. While I recognize the challenges posed by the transition to renewable energy, it is clear that Tesla's contributions to the global energy landscape are not only valid but essential. I rule in favor of Tesla. This lawsuit is dismissed. The room erupted in applause. Elon stood motionless for a moment, processing the reality of what had just happened. It was a decisive victory, but it was more than just a win in court. It was the validation of everything Tesla had worked for, a future powered by clean, renewable energy. Elon's team gathered around him, congratulating him with enthusiasm. But he remained focused, a sense of calm sweeping over him. He knew that this was just one victory in a long and ongoing battle. There were still obstacles ahead, but for the first time in a long time, the path forward felt clear. As he walked out of the courtroom, the weight of the moment hit him. This wasn't just a personal win, it was a win for the planet. Tesla's vision had been affirmed, and the world's transition to renewable energy had gained irreversible momentum. Later that evening, Elon sat alone in his office at Tesla headquarters. The building was quiet, the hum of activity slowly fading as the day wound down. He looked out over the city skyline, lost in thought. The victory in court had been hard-won, but it was the culmination of years of sacrifice, struggle, and unrelenting belief in a better future. He thought about the people who had helped make this possible, his team, his investors, the countless individuals who had supported Tesla's vision from the beginning. But he also thought about the road ahead. The real work was just beginning. The fight for the planet's future was ongoing, and there would be more challenges to face. But in that moment, as the city lights flickered below, Elon knew one thing for certain: the world was changing, and Tesla was leading the way. The next morning, news outlets around the world erupted with coverage of the court ruling. Headlines across the globe read, "Tesla wins historic legal battle, the future of energy is now." The ruling sent shockwaves through the fossil fuel industry, and Tesla's stock soared to new heights. The victory was a rallying cry for the renewable energy movement, signaling that the days of fossil fuels dominating the global market were numbered. Politicians, environmentalists, and industry leaders took to social media to express their support for Tesla's victory. Climate change activists called it a turning point in the battle for the planet's future. And at Tesla, the atmosphere was electric with excitement as the company prepared to take its next steps. Elon Musk stood at the forefront of a revolution. A revolution that was no longer a distant dream but a present-day reality. And as the world looked toward the future, it was clear that one thing was undeniable: Tesla wasn't just changing the way we powered our homes and cars. It was changing the way we thought about the world itself. Tesla had won the battle, but the war for the future was far from over. And Elon Musk, the visionary behind it all, was more determined than ever to ensure that the future of energy would be clean, sustainable, and powered by the sun and the wind. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?